SPJ, so welcome to everyone. As a reminder, this is a live stream meeting being captured by the laptop down there, so proceed accordingly. Madam Secretary Treasurer, would you please read the roll?
All right. Here's the roll. Kevin Newberry, President.
Here.
President-elect Matt Hall.
Here.
Rebecca Young, Secretary Treasurer. Here. At-large Lauren Buck. Here. At-large Mike Riley.
Here.
At-large Yvette Walker.
Here.
At-large Tess Fox.
Here.
Thanks very much. For the folks in the room, if we would just go around and introduce ourselves individually with just a line about where you work. We already know your title, so we'll start with Yvette, please.
I'm Yvette Walker first. I'm the Assistant Dean at Gaylord College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of ODU, and I am SPJ Chapter Advisor at Gaylord College.
I'm Tess Fox. I'm a copy editor at the Idaho Press in Nampa.
Nampa. Right. Very good. Mr. Hall.
Matt Hall. I am the Editorial and Opinion Director at the San Diego Union Tribune.
I'm Rebecca Aguilar. I'm a freelance journalist, professor of broadcast news at Richland College in Dallas, and also the SPJ Diversity Chair.
I'm Lauren Bartlett. I work in communications at the University of Southern California.
Mike Bradley, University of Illinois Chicago campus, professor of data and digital journalism.
And Patty Newberry, I teach journalism at Miami of Ohio. So thanks to everybody for being here. I'd also like to introduce the staff. If we could start with Linda Hall.
Good morning. I'm Linda Hall. I am the office manager of the National Office and Regional Post.
Larry Messing, Director of Development.
Ashley Newmeyer. I'm one half of the communications coordinating team. I'm Zoe Berg. I'm the other half of the communications coordinating team.
Coordinating that nicely.
I'm Matthew Kemp, and I'm program coordinator. Rashad Salim, I'm the director of conferences at SPJ.
Caroline Escobar. I'm the manager of membership and chapters.
Tony Peterson, I am the creative director.
Rod Hicks, I'm journalism hall.
Lou Harry, quill editor, and run the SPJ Google training program.
Jennifer Royer. I'm the director of communications.
So you got Billy. I'm sorry, Ann. That's louder.
I'm Billy. I am the web person, computer person, streaming person. You all know me.
If only you'd run across here, we would have known. That's
I only did that once.
Well, thank you very much. I know that you were acknowledged on the stage last night, but I'd like to join in the praise and the thanks for all of your efforts for this conference and all you've done for the past year for the organization. So a round of applause, please, for our staff.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank my colleagues here for the support that they provided for this CASPER project. You know, we call it a 6-month project, but it actually started in November, and it didn't end until yesterday, really. And everybody up here played a role in that, and I wish more of them could have come to CASPER. And you know, they were also helpful in getting some of the CASPER participants here, and they were immensely thankful for that. So I just want you guys to know that I thank you for all that you did.
Thanks very much for being here, and best of luck packing up and getting back home.
Yes.
Safe travels.
Thank you. Thank you guys.
All right, thanks very much. Moving to our next agenda item, and that would be goals for the coming year. So in your board packets, fellow board members, I did have a memo about some of my goals for the coming year. As I said last night, I am not proposing any new initiatives or big new endeavors because I think the work at hand that we've already talked about so often is considerable and serious, and we need to execute really well. This is the dawning of the new board, as we know. We're 7 members in the room right now. This is really weird and wonderful. So, again, for the benefit of folks who are sitting with us today, you probably know a lot of this. We transitioned from a board of 23 to a board of 18 to now a board of 7 plus 2 appointments to be made. And the whole idea of this was to switch our focus to be more strategic, less of the worker bees, more of the thinker bees. So thus we begin our work with that. I'd like to just say, first of all, in terms of how I like to make decisions and how I like to work with people, I tend to be very collaborative. You're going to get a lot of email from me. And I hope we can all be very civil to each other, collegial, work together to build consensus, and prevent some of the discord that is so well known to our members and our staff from last year. So I think it's going to be really key that we, the board, reach out to our membership, seek our members to do more of the heavy lifting. They are doing that. We just need to bring them into the fold and work together as we try to accomplish our goals. So a few things I want to go over. You heard from our search consultants, Talent, about the progress for finding an executive director. It was great to have them here, see them face-to-face, talk with them. I think that really helped move the conversation forward, and really good to know that some candidates have now been identified, and we're likely to interview 1 or 2 possibilities this week, and that's really good news. As you know, because I believe this came up in open meeting, the consultants would like to stay on and continue to work for the organization as they wrap up the assessment piece, which is essentially wrapped up with this meeting after they issue their full report. But they have begun talking with us about the possibility of staying on, and particulars of that would be contractual, so I'll comment on those during the executive session, but just to let folks know that this is a possibility that we're going to need to talk about. I'd like to move next to the Strategic Planning Task Force and call on Victor Hernandez to give us a report. We are not going to go through the full slide deck that's attached to our agenda. I think everybody in the room has probably seen it. It's certainly available online. I know that Victor has presented it at least 3 times so far. So unless there's any desire to walk through the entire slideshow, we'll just acknowledge that it exists on spj.org. And instead, I think it would be more fruitful for Victor to give us a report from those sessions, kind of anecdotally, how folks reacted and so forth, and then talk about the next steps. So I'll turn it over to Victor.
Yeah, thanks, Patty. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, thanks. If we can spare the 4th rollout of this presentation, I think that's a win for all. We came to San Antonio as the task force committee of 8, very much focused on the listening experience, where we can receive additional input from membership as well as provide a window into the past 4.5 months of research and exploration and the efforts to understand what the fundamental challenges are before SPJ and where we need to grow and where we need to do better in terms of providing member value back into the body. I would, again, refer everyone to either the package, if that's accessible to you, for the complete survey data results, as well as project timelines and other sort of overview pieces. But if you don't have access to those packets, that's okay too, because we've been operating toward real diligence around transparency and open access, so that this information is also readily available on the SPJ info page online. Through the town hall experience yesterday, where we had, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 people, a few people came in late, a few people had to leave early. It actually went long because there were some very powerful testimonials from folks who were, that invested in the future of the organization and what's happening currently and how that should influence the further growth and where we make strides and improvements. But we captured notes. We of course took every anecdote serious from that opportunity. And we had a more extensive board presentations to SPJ and SDX on Thursday and Friday. In large, we've received nothing but support and appreciation for the work that has persisted thus far. There's a lot of intrigue and a lot of curiosity, and also a lot of desire to see us potentially do more with the survey. If you're not familiar with the survey effort, we dispatched the 34 question chain to all 5,500 registered members and got about 10% return, which is okay, not great, not lousy, but it's just okay. But within that 10% sample, we saw a skew very heavily toward our older members. And so there's been a lot of push and interest to say, hey, how can we do better to perhaps get a glimpse into what our younger members are thinking and feeling, and what they desire more to be closer associated with what SPJ is doing. And so we've been talking even over the last few days about what that could look like. If that's necessary, there's some other efforts underway. Within the next couple of weeks, we will provide opportunities for online focus groups that we're organizing. And we think that will be another opportunity to facilitate feedback, ideas, some of the concerns. I should also note, those that haven't seen the packet or looked online at the results, we received an abundance of concern around everything from breakdowns in communication over the past year to not understanding the identity of what SPJ is providing back into the industry and its members, and a whole host of areas and issues where we recognize there's real growth potential for us to be doing better and more consistent toward, or often the case that it's the perception of the optics, that maybe the things that we are doing really well just aren't being celebrated and touted in enough sort of ample ways so that everybody understands and can benefit. So we've collected all of that information. This is now, with the completion of EIJ19, we'll also conclude phase 1 of this task force, and phase 2 will begin with a new chair, Matt Hall, we are transitioning as we speak. The baton is being handed. It has been personally a blast helping lead the charge with the Elite 8, I call them, because they really were the dream team. Everybody contributed evenly across the board, and so I'm very appreciative of that. However, in the meantime, since all of this is sort of picked up, I've inherited a new newsroom in Seattle, Washington, and I need to provide 100% attention toward that and some other things going on there. So with that said, I will continue to remain on as a resource, but Matt is going to lead the charge, and the committee is in great hands there. And we have expectations that in addition to Matt's onboarding, that the new executive director, of course, will be integrated for the full sort of buy-in, as well as his or her ideas and influence toward the greater good of what we're trying to achieve.
Thanks very much for that report. I would only add that the next 2 steps, again, to reiterate, we'll open a couple of focus groups. Matt and I will work closely to determine the best dates for that, and then consider other ways of collecting more data. Tess has been in conversation about the need for younger member input, and of course, as soon as we have an executive director, we'll bring that person into the fold. So thank you to everyone on who helped with that effort, and all in service to getting a good plan in place. The important piece is collecting more granular data about all of our competing groups. I think that's a piece that we didn't spend very much time on in phase 1, really to have a better understanding of what the other 65 or so journalism advocacy groups in the nation do, don't do, size, growth, all kinds of data points that I think will help us understand our place in the ecosystem a little more fully. All right, so thank you for that. Any questions from the board? Or
I have a question.
Thank you.
How much of the Chargers going to win by today?
We'll lose by 10, but we're undefeated at the moment, so that's all that matters.
Very good. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for all your work. I stepped into the board meeting when you were in the middle of it, and easy to understand, to the point, because some of those can be complicated and you get lost in all the info, and so I would say thank you.
All right, hearing no more questions, I'll move on to my next bullet point, which is advocacy. I think SPJ has done exceptionally well in this category in the years I've been on the board. Many more statements coming out, much quicker reaction to threats to press rights, to any range of issues, and so hope to continue that. Haven't had a chance yet to work with our communications director, who's the expert on making that all roll out efficiently. One thing I would like to note, though, is that I don't have the capacity to do the number of public appearances that Alex was able to do in the past year. And as those invitations come to us or we seek them out, I really am going to call on all of you, as well as chapter leaders, to be the face and the voice of SPJ. I really don't think it's necessary for the president always to be the person taking that invitation. And so we'll try to make smart decisions in terms of geography and expertise to match with any kind of invitation that comes, whether it's for a public appearance or for an interview or whatever the call might be. So stand by to be called on in that way. In terms of the membership committee, I'd like to, if you don't mind, call on Colin DeVries, who's here. Jumping ahead a little bit on the agenda, Colin has agreed to remain as our membership chair, and I'm very grateful that he's willing to do that. And I'd like him to report on his meeting of yesterday, and then I'll jump back in with a few ideas I have to support that.
So, yeah, thanks, Patty. So we had a membership committee meeting that I thought was pretty productive. We talked about the membership drive, and the results were reassuring. We had 220 new members sign up during the drive period this year, which was 72 more than the same period last year. Those are new members. And there were 607 renewing members during the drive, which is significant. And that's 311 more than the previous years during the same period. So for us, it's reassuring to see that people are still willing to be part of this organization, and they're joining, they're renewing, and they're doing it when they see a break in the cost. We talked a lot about finances as well in our meeting. we want to do this again. We want to, it was successful, so we want to do it again. But we're wondering if timing might be better, different time of the year. So it was sort of in the dog days of summer, and it kind of happened quickly. And I've learned from a few people at this conference that the communication of it wasn't ideal at the chapter and the community levels. Our friends in the freelance community, not all of them were aware of it. Some friends in local chapters around the country weren't aware of it. So I need to work on my own communication around these things. But I also, sort of put some trust in everyone else on the board and the regions to do the same. Lauren?
I know that summer is not an ideal time for students, and there was a discussion among some of the people on the last board and a hope that this would happen in the fall for students, and also to make sure that the discounted student rate is structured in such a way that it's actually discounted and cheaper than if they went on did it now. My understanding is that wasn't the structure. So you might want to talk to some staff resources who are familiar with the rate structure to make sure it's something that actually gives the students a break. And maybe talk to some professors or retired professors, one sitting right next to you with great deal of experience, who can give you some guidance on timing.
So we talked about that in our committee. We have some professors on the committee. And yeah, so one of the things that, and Patty was in that meeting as well. One of the things, the $25 discount, it was, the regular price was $37.50 for students. We reduced it to $25. And that was a price point that the people in our committee who are academic people found was resonated with students. But we want to think about doing it at the beginning of each semester. In the fall, within the first 2 weeks in the fall, also in the spring, within the first 2 weeks. But one of the things that we got 64 new student members join during the summer when there was no school in session, which I think is reassuring. But right, we considered it.
And just one thing on the price point, because there's a multi-year discount for students when they join. So if you just want to make sure that the cost of the individual year isn't the same or more if they do the multi-year discount at the regular rate.
When you mean when they join as a freshman, they get those.
And so I would just encourage you to talk to staff that has all those details and particulars, so they can give you those suggestions, and just so we can try to get as many students as possible to join.
Just making a note here. Okay, good. And the other thing is, I just want to emphasize, and I've been emphasizing with people I've been talking to, these people who've just joined in the last couple of months, we need to engage them right away. When Caroline goes back to her office and starts pushing through all these applications finally, I'm encouraging all of our chapter leaders to go into their roster and before the end of the month, for sure, and figure out who just joined. Send them an email. Tell them, thank you for joining. Please come to our next event. Or let's have coffee, or just engage them in a more individual way, because that's really the key to keeping them. Because someone who just joined, they want to be active. They say, oh, I just paid this money to be part of this group, and I haven't heard from anyone. What did I just join? So reaching out to them is super important. And so the finances component, we are in the dark mostly on what these drives actually mean for our finances. Is there an impact on what is the impact when we reduce the rate for membership? Do we lose money when we offer these reduced rates? How feasible is it to run these drives annually or semi-annually? Or just do student-only drives in addition to an annual sort of all member drive. I just don't, we don't have those, I don't have those numbers. I don't know how, if, what the recommendations are from the controller.
Right. So I think starting with some data, understanding what's possible, and I think it's going to be really key not to make it confusing for members. Oh, I joined at this time and it was this rate, and then the next time I joined it was this, and that's not going to help your members' impression of our efficacy if there's a lot of confusion or difficulty.
Right.
So.
That's a great point, because one of the things that Caroline, I learned at this conference, is working on is auto renewal, so that members will no longer receive. The idea when you move into this new database is that members won't receive a mailed invoice; they'll just automatically be charged. They have a credit card on file, and they won't be a lapse. They'll just be automatically renewed. Which is huge, because a lot of what I'm hearing and what I've heard from in New York is that when people lapse, they don't even realize it. We actually did a phone drive in New York, and the most common response, we called recently lapsed members, the most common thing that they were saying was just like, oh, I didn't even realize I lapsed. Sure, yeah, I'll give you the money here. Here's my credit card. So I think the auto renewal tool, I think that will be huge for us.
Jennifer, can I ask a staff question? Do you happen to know, would that auto renewal first indicate to the member that they're going to be renewed and allow them to say yay or nay? It wouldn't just charge them without.
I'm sure it would.
That's typically the way.
I feel like we'd have to give them an option at any time to opt out of that.
Yeah.
I think legally we're required to. I would defer to Mark there, but you have to offer an opt out.
Okay.
So
we'll make sure that's how that rolls out.
Well, that's another question that I have. I didn't know about that until I, saw Caroline casually at the dance thing and talked to her. Is there other things related to this database that I don't know about? Probably. And how are we?
That's the answer for everything related to your database. Probably there are things we don't know.
Is there a working group around this project? And because we have ideas on how to redesign the registration form as well, to connect people to communities, like our freelance community, and so we want to be involved in that from a membership perspective, right? In that context.
And I think what you're offering here is great, a lot of great energy. See that we were able to pick up new members with a quick hit program, but also the complexity of all these working parts. We have membership, but membership needs to work with members, with our regions, and get information down, up and down, and I'm going to touch on all that.
Okay.
Better integration of all of our working parts will serve members better.
I just have a few more things. One of the things that we're looking at updating are the member resources online. We're going to update the Programs in a Box page. We're going to, and hopefully Andy Schatz can help us with providing programs that were really excellent from the local chapters, and we can just update that Programs in a Box page to just have a listing of successful programs that have worked around the country, and then promote that, push that out again to people, and so that the chapters have ideas for engagement and recruitment and retention strategies. Also, we're reviewing the website overall and seeing where there are membership tools and resources sprinkled around the website in different areas, and trying to figure out a way to pull them together into one place. Because I have noticed you have to dig around for a lot of things sometimes, and we're just going to see if there's any plausible way to make it so it's a little bit easier to find. And the other thing, I'm working with our freelance community. I have been talking to them a lot this conference, learning about what they're developing for freelancers and how we can promote that as a membership benefit to them. Because we have a ton of freelance members, and they're working on some really great tools, and we want to get those out there. And the other bold sort of ambitious thing that I talked about in our committee was setting a goal for membership. I want our committee to bring on 500 new members. I want to increase our membership by 500 this year, going forward. That would be a reverse of the trend that we've seen. The membership drive helps to sort of keep things flat, but if we didn't do the membership drive, I think we would still see a decline. So if we try to do these, student drives and maybe think about doing another membership drive next year, I think we can reach the goal. But retention will be the key also.
All right, thank you very much. Colin, any direct questions about things for Yvette, please?
About the students, if you do decide to, kind of do this every semester or maybe fall, it would be great to, as you said, try to time it those first couple of weeks, because that's when people are beginning to have their first meetings at campus. Maybe week 2 and 3, they're beginning to have their first ones. And then if there's any way, if not in paper, but to push out kind of a packet that they can print out and take to meetings. Students, I think, would just really appreciate just having something available to them. Or if it's on the website, getting information to the region coordinators and down to the chapters. I think students are kind of looking around. Anything we can give them to be able just to take directly to their meetings, I think would be helpful for people to fill out those forms or either go online and fill it out.
You mean a packet of registration forms?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, packet. And then the other piece is graduates. If there's any way, I know at my college, when they are graduating literally from the stage, from the commencement stage, our alumni group says, hey, you're alumni now, join alumni. We want to capture those students as they are transitioning from students to professional. So if there's any way we can figure out how to do that, I think we would capture a lot of people that would probably, as they transition, they're lapsing. And we're not capturing them. So I think that would be really a good way for people to do it.
Totally. I don't know what was done before as far as promoting the post-grad rates to students who are graduating that year. I mean, maybe, you can...
I'll give you the history. It's not here. At another time, it was my idea, and it was enacted. And it's somehow gotten mixed up over the years. Ever so briefly, just so I'll put it on the record, when Dave Carlson was president, I first came on the board, and I used to talk to a few students who said their parents were still subsidizing them a year, 2, 3 years out of college because they weren't getting much money, so that's why they didn't. And it hasn't changed. SPJ was an option. So what we came up with was, certainly on the post-grad rate, was pay for 2 years up front, the 3rd year is for free. It is incorrect as it now looks on the website. I don't know. It's not Billy's law. It has nothing to do with it. Something got screwed up along the way somewhere. That was to give the benefit of the doubt and to do it as a graduation gift. Linda can tell you it was promoted as like, get it out to the parents, which is the perfect thing to do to promote it. But I'm not going to take up time in the meeting. I am volunteering myself to help you with that particular area as someone who's been working on this for many years.
Thank you. There's a question over here, Lauren.
It got addressed when Sue brought up the information.
Thank you, that's all.
I was going to say, I know I've said this to you personally, but publicly I want to say in this meeting, I know it was a difficult year for SPJ, and I know you had some very strong feelings about the sponsorships. I know you had a honeymoon that you went to. So I appreciate your commitment to the organization, to the membership committee. You are clearly the right person at the right time for this passion and energy. I really appreciate that. 2 thoughts is, one, I love the idea that we may revisit. I love the idea that we may revisit the discounted rate. I think that obviously was a success by the numbers and by the fact that you pulled it together in very short order. Obviously, it was in August during a short month. A lot of chapters were dark, and a lot of students were doing what students do in August, which is not thinking about SPJ. So I think doing that again would be smart. I wonder if when we get the new executive director in, that might be a time for branding, new ED, new SPJ. Here's a discount to get more members. And just one other quick thought. At San Diego, we're very focused on membership. And so your idea of outreach to members who are new to the organization is dead on. It's brilliant. You need to do that, to get that kind of outreach at the beginning. But also at the end, when they roll off, we would get the membership rosters from headquarters. I know we have issues with that, but we get the membership rosters from headquarters and reach out when they cycled off. We would get those membership rosters every month and then reach out personally. Why did you leave? Consider going back? What can we do differently? So that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a membership organization, as you know. You're doing all the right things, so thanks.
Well, yeah, thanks so much. And you brought up the roster thing, and yeah, I would like to start getting either monthly rolls or whatever. I don't get anything right now. I have to ask for it each time from Caroline. And if there was a monthly membership status report that Caroline put together, like she could send me, that would be great.
I wanted to tell you that you have some great ideas. One of the things that we do with the Forward chapter is I was their membership, BE, and what I would do is call every new member and say, hi, welcome to our group. I'd leave a message for 30 seconds. It was an email. I called them. And there were several that came to our events because I called them. But maybe what you can do is also work with the chapter membership people and help them there. And they can be your ambassadors for the chapters. Because I got the list from you, from National. And I don't remember if I was working with the membership person at the time, but that one-on-one always helped. So I'm sure the chapters would help you.
All right, thank you very much for all that. And again, echo what Matt said. Thank you for your good work on this and energy for a lot of tasks ahead. I'd like to go next to talking about the board structure and some suggestions on how we can work together better as a board and kind of fulfill this idea of being more strategic. So I'm going to pass around something that I did not have ready for the packet, with my apologies. And if there's some leftovers, could we at least have a few copies for folks here who can follow along? We'll add this to our minutes so everybody can see it. But right now it's a working document for discussion. That's why it's still work in progress. So now that we are a smaller board, my general thinking is that we need to make sure we have very clear lines of communication with all the various working parts of SPJ. So I'll wait for that to come around so that you can see it and notice it as we move on. And as that's making its way around, I want to note that Joe Skeel put this together originally back about probably 3 or 4 years ago when we first started talking about a smaller board. If we're going to be smaller, how are we going to operate, right? What's the best chart here? So board of directors, president, president-elect, secretary, treasurer, obviously, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 at large as seated here around the table. We do have 2 appointments to make, and that's a little bit later here in the agenda, where we'll be talking about what we see as our needs for those appointments, where we have holes in expertise, where we have particular tasks ahead, where we want to match that with possible appointees. But you see here what I've proposed is that 2 at-large directors divide up our committee list, half and half, and they become the line of communications with Colin, with each of our committees. So the committee chair always knows who's my board liaison. Who do I go to get help, to get issues addressed? Does that then need to go up to the president or the president-elect or the secretary? Where in the organization does that need to be addressed? Right, so that there's clean lines back and forth. Same with our communities, who often have felt like they're the stepchild of the organization. They don't know who to go to have conversations, to move along their particular goals, to share what they're doing, importantly, to share what they're doing. Next, we have a new opportunity to work with our chapters through the RICs. Obviously, the RICs are not on the board anymore, and that's, it's both a loss in some ways, but it's a real opportunity, in my estimation, to have the regional coordinators really work for their chapters. Speaking personally, when I was on the board as RD4, I did not give nearly enough attention to the chapters in my region. I had a long-term goal to start a chapter in West Virginia. I made 3 or 4 phone calls or emails, and that's as much as I ever got going there. So we have no chapter in the state, no professional chapter in the state of West Virginia. So now that RCs are freed from board responsibilities, the idea really is that they can be working with and for their chapters, seeing the holes in their maps, like, wow, nothing in West Virginia, nothing in this state or that state, or too little, right? How about all those unaffiliated members that nobody pays attention to regularly, right? The 41% might even be bigger now. I'm seeing some nodding, right? So how can the RCs help us communicate with folks who don't have a chapter? Maybe if there's some, some group of folks in some pocket of their state or their region who would like to work together to start a new chapter. Wow, how about that? And so those are, just the idea of the RCs, and I'd like somebody on the board to be the liaison for the RCs. I also think it's important that we have a direct line for students and educators. It's not a clean group, right, because students are also members, educators are members, so they're in chapters or they're unaffiliated, and, right, there's a lot of overlap here, but again, the student in North Dakota who doesn't know who to go to, right, let's not have them call Linda Hall every time. Let's have them work through a board structure, know who to talk to, and to get the problem solved. And then lastly, I put members at large. I'm not sure what I did. Maybe that was my 41%. So this is just a start. These lines don't correlate with any names at this point. And I guess I would like the board now to give me some feedback based on this early start. What's missing, first of all, in the constituencies? Is there a particular group of folks that we should name and assign to a board member that's not, or do I have any duplication? Should we collapse any of these ideas, thoughts, starting with
First of all, I think it's very lean. I like it that it's very lean, it's very direct. It really gives, I don't know the role of at-larges on this board, but it really gives them a direction. Because many times at-large officers, and again, I just know from another board that I was on, there was no direction, and each one, of the at-larges we have now, some of them will have maybe one of these is their passion. So what a great way to take that into account. But I like the leanness of this, and I hope that the way you have it written out here, that there will be a place on the website where they go, okay, don't call Linda Hall, the at-large is responsible over the committees. But it has to be somewhere, again, and I was listening to Colin about this, it has to be somewhere on the website where it's easy, that I don't have to drill down, and after a while I'm like, forget it. But
I see a little bug on the front page that's like, who do I call? Got a question? Boom, and then maybe it opens up a place where emails are available to connect with the person. Sometimes it might be a staff issue, right? But I think, to reduce the load on the staff, come to a board member, and then the board member decides whether they have an answer. If they can answer it, great, they know how to solve it for, but might have to then, be in touch with staff. I saw another hand, Lauren.
It might be that the members at large belongs with the RCs and chapters, because when you don't have them connected to the RCs, then I think you're losing an opportunity. I think if the RCs are working with every member of their region, whether it's an affiliated member, a member of a community, or a member of a chapter, I think that's going to make us stronger.
Other thoughts? Yes, Beth.
Yeah, I can see a point to that, and if we do that, and if we don't need that appointee line from members at large, we might bring the appointee into the fold elsewhere. Because what we're doing with appointees, if we're taking the opportunity to kind of fill the rest of this board, as you said, where might there be holes in expertise and whatever. And what I see immediately is we've got a lot of university folks on our board and not as many full-time journalists. So if we have one appointee kind of left over, pulling into some of the other areas might be helpful because, just because of that.
Especially with 6 or 12 committees answering all the one person.
Well, I see that as two.
Oh, okay.
Two.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but so, yeah. And then the other thing I say is, I really do like the fact that we even have this. The other thing to keep in mind is, as an at-large director, if we were on a task force, and depending on what that task force was, and if you chaired that task force or if you were just a member, there might be less opportunity to do that kind of work if we are working, diligently with the community, with the committees of the community. Not saying we couldn't do that, but there might be just less opportunity for the kind of work I think that at-large folks have done in the past, or maybe not. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Are you saying that it's maybe too much to assign, let's say, Director at-large number 1 here has 6 committees, would not then have the time to also be active in a task force? Is that what you're saying?
Perhaps depending on what the task force role was.
Right.
And depending on how much, frankly, has to be done.
Right.
But if we did pull an appointee in to help, that might alleviate some of that.
Yeah, right. So depending on how many task forces we decide to go forward with, in addition to the strategic planning task force,
right.
That might be a line of a particular assignment. Maybe somebody on the board is going to be the liaison to make sure that the task force chairs are getting what they need, et cetera, et cetera. Any shots?
Yeah, I just would like to share with the board, which you can dismiss if you think it's not important, but my hesitation when this first came up is that I didn't like the idea of limiting members or chapters to who they thought they could contact. I mean, it does make sense to have a clear idea of who you can contact, but I don't think that you should feel that you can only contact one person. I think everybody on the board represents everybody, and it maybe just adding a sentence, but you can contact anybody at any time.
And I think it depends on the issue too. It may be somebody on the board has expertise in a certain area of technology, and the RC feels better going to that person rather than their main contact. So I think it's contextual, I think this cleans up some of the issues we've had the last couple of years. And to Rebecca's point, I think a bug on the homepage is very good. But also making sure the RCs and the other chapter leaders remind their membership of this time and time again, because they'll communicate with them locally. And that member of the Deadline Club may be also on a couple of national committees and things like that. The committee chairs need to really be pressing it. Okay, here's your main person for education to go to that. But if they're having a tech issue with their student chapter, maybe they come to me. And we used to kind of do that a little bit with the trainings Tara's used to do at EIJ, and we had different people sitting around the room, and the chapter leaders would come in, a lot of college students. I'd help them with Twitter or website or whatever their needs were. But we've had a structure for that EIJ every year. This is very similar to that workflow.
Just real quick,
Yeah, we could certainly reintroduce that at EIJ if that seems to be next year. Let's Yvette first, and then over here, and then let's.
I appreciate Andy's concerns. I think that your concerns might be for people who maybe know who to go to, who have contacts already with people who are here, but I think for people who have no clue, who have been very bewildered in the past, and I don't know who to go to, I think this is very helpful. But I also agree. We all represent the organization, and I think people certainly can pick up the phone if they already have a relationship or know if someone has technology needs. And yeah, I don't think we should preclude people talking, but I think for the average member who just, I don't know who to talk to, and even particularly students, I think having something like this would be very helpful to that member.
Well, let me just clarify maybe what my intent was, because I have heard about people frustrated that they contact the person who is their representative and don't get it. And so I want them to feel like they can contact anybody if that happens.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, the general idea is if the communication is coming up to somebody on this board, you are obligated to help that person find an answer, right? And so if you go to your chapter president or an RC and you're not getting, then you can jump over that person and come to your liaison. But of course, it's going to take a little time to build this into our practices, and we've got to talk about it a lot if we go forward this way. As to the particular assignments, I don't want to do that in the room. I'll have a lot of follow-up email with all of you and get your desires, what matches well with your own professional background, your skill set, your interests, and so forth. And then we'll try to make those assignments and see if there's any particular finagling of the points here. Yeah, Paul. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to go over here. Hazel first, please. Thank you. And identify yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Hazel Becker. I'm a retired journalist and a member of DC Pro Chapter. I've been a member of the freelance community as well, and one of the things that I've been most concerned about is the members at large. The idea of having communities was to create affinity groups throughout SPJ to bring people together who are too far from a chapter or who, for whatever reason, aren't involved in their chapter. So I wouldn't put members at large with chapter, I wouldn't put members at large with the at-large director who is doing chapters and regions. I would put that person with the communities. And because that's a way to really start to leverage all the at-large people who would really like to be involved in SPJ. So that's my suggestion.
We do not at present have an at-large community, do we?
No.
No. Right. Okay.
No.
All right. Saw a hand over here, Colin.
So this might be too soon to bring up, but Hillary is here. Hillary and I talked a lot. Try to put you on the spot. We talked a lot about potentially, and this is, and Jane is also here. She was here. Asking regional coordinators to serve as sort of regional freelance network managers. So all the freelancers within their region, they would help to bring together and organize for networking events, networking lunches, get them to sign up in a directory. Our directory is, the freelance directory is organized by state geographically. So if a region can see the listing of freelancers in their states, they might be able to communicate with them directly and organize lunches or events, some kind of meet and greet, or even just share the resources that the freelance community is developing more directly rather than, and that would be through the regional coordinators. But again, it's pretty early. We just talked about it like yesterday, so we still need to get Jane to think about it. But that's an idea that we floated.
All right, very good. And was there any additional on the chart? Yes.
I just want to say I love it. I think it's great. It helps at a time when communication is a problem. It sets up clear lines of it. And I have a thought in terms of who's missing. It's the people that are missing, the people that might be counterintuitive, the people who are not members, particularly the affinity groups and other journalism organizations. So maybe, I don't know what your plans are to connect with them, but that's important. So maybe
that has typically been something that the executive director takes the lead on, building relationships with our competitors essentially. But that's something to think about. What would that look like from a board to board perspective? So we think about that. Yeah, great.
And that's a great idea too. And maybe because she is, sharing the wealth and having other people, take the lead on it, find key people that do have connections with those other organizations, the NHJs, the EIJs, JAWS, whatever. Because they will have a passion, like obviously I have a passion for NHJ. But this way, that is their passion because, they still have one foot in each organization. So I think that's great.
Right. And it does correspond, of course, with the task force's work to understand these other groups and what they're doing that we're not doing. So that might be a this year kind of line of communication. And that person, maybe if we could pull that person, somebody who's already on the task force and wants to, make that one of their responsibilities as an at-large board member or an appointee. So, with that said, thank you. We'll move forward. You'll expect a follow-up on how we fill the chart. I'll play with it again, trying to incorporate some of these suggestions. And like all things, living, breathing document. So, Mike Riley?
Yeah, just one very quick kind of elephant in the room question, comment.
Sure.
Associate ED question mark.
Oh, well, that's just Patty going, wow, wouldn't that be nice if we could do that again?
It sure would.
That's not something that I can make a decision on right at this point. That's pretty early. So the most important is getting in an executive director and then seeing how that person wants to organize the staff, if there's any realignment of duties, tasks, titles, etc. So what I've spelled out here is all the existing titles, close enough, kind of, probably. And then I just put back in that associate question mark. I assume that's something that number one might want to consider, how to, whether a number two is in order. So, but thank you, that's.
Yeah, to fill in the skill set that the ED doesn't have.
Correct.
I think would be a really nice structure here.
Right.
I apologize, I have to go. My son has to work tonight in Dallas. He was here, you guys didn't meet him, and I have a friend in the hospital. But everybody knows. You guys- So
Thank you for being here, thank you for joining the board.
And if you guys, any of these committees or anybody, but then I have my own committee, so.
Yeah.
And thank you, everybody. It was a good welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Everybody have safe travels.
Safe
Thank
travels.
you.
Safe
Safe
travels.
travels, you guys.
Same to you.
Bye-bye. Oh, bye, everybody. Thank you. Freelancers, bye.
All right. Well, let me move to the appointee thing next. I'm sorry, was anybody else still have their hand up on anything that's live right now? Okay, let's go to the appointee. So again, reiterating, this is our first time doing this. No, it'll be the second year doing this. We were a little slow out of the gate last year, bringing on Victor, and Yvette DeVilla Richards was our second appointee. So I'd like to move that along. I don't think it's appropriate at this table to throw out names because we don't, right? That would not be appropriate to name anyone at this point, but I do think it's appropriate for us to talk about what we see around the table, what we see in the near term in terms of our work, and what kind of person do we want to bring on, what skill set. We moved away from the representational model where it was like, we need someone from Washington State, or we need this balance of gender or ethnicity or classroom versus newsroom, et cetera. And we're trying to get the best thinkers. However, the appointees give us the opportunity to look around the room, around the table, and figure out what do we need in the short term. So, very open question. What do we need that we don't have? What do we need more of that we might have some of already? So let me start with Yvette, then Mike, then Lauren. We'll go around the table. Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned, a lot of us around the table are university affiliated, so I think we should consider part-time or full-time working journalists, or working freelancers, or working folks in the industry. So I think one thing, I think we also continue to look at diversity in all its colors, no pun intended, because that can mean lots of different things, not just the color of skin. And then other than that, I think that as far as the skill set, I think we want someone, obviously, who's passionate about this organization and who has the capacity to do the work, organize, you know the drill.
Right. Good ideas, good executor, right? Mike.
With losing Victor, I'm saying diversity, newsroom, leadership, Beth said we're very education heavy, and also freelance. With Alex rotating off the board, we've kind of lost that voice on the board. I think we need more Nebraskans too.
Absolutely. If our first is called the Nebraska appointee, I'm going to change the term.
Tough day yesterday.
Lauren.
I know one of the ideas behind this was if in any given year we needed a particular kind of expertise because of the focus. And I think this year that's strategic planning.
Right.
So if we have a member with strong background in strategic planning, I have some that, if there are others, I think that this is the year for that.
Sorry to interrupt, Matt, are you keeping minutes now?
Jennifer has relieved me of that painful duty.
Yeah, I had asked her to stay because I knew Rebecca had to
Okay,
leave.
good. Thank God.
So thank you, as always. Every word. Get that Nebraska in. So yes, strategic planning and Matt.
So I agree with what Annette, Mike, and Lauren have said, that diversity should be top of mind. Strategy, obviously, and strategic planning is huge. I will note that at a time when SPJ is known for being a bunch of old white guys from the East Coast, we have 5 women around this table, or did. We have 2 women of color. We have 5 people west of Mississippi, so come on. And we should still keep in mind, obviously, diversity. There is one painfully obvious absence, which is a student. So I think we should think of that. And I think if we look into a student at a chapter, that we might look at, this gets a little more granular probably than you want, but I will not name names. That we look at a joint ONA SPJ chapter, because ONA is doing a lot of things right, and I think we can learn from them. I think we don't, while we all are passionate about freedom of information and open government, we don't have a stalwart in the Dave Coulier mold. I think that would be smart to think of. And I was also thinking an interesting place to look in terms of partnerships and what Victor's task force turned out when they talked about webinars and online training. Maybe someone from Pointer who might come on board. Like I think we were fortunate with Victor to get someone of kind of national prominence and stature, and I think it gave some energy to the board. And I think that thinking along those lines this year may help as well. Now, obviously, that is a long menu for 2 people, but those are just some thoughts that I had.
There are only 2 SPJ ONA chapters in the country. SPJ ONA DePaul, which I founded in the Georgia chapter, which was the first. ONA, when we tried to form one in 2014 in ASU, SPJ said yes, ONA said no, and it said no ever since. And it's got us as the 2 organizations are too polarized. We might want to talk with Irving, Washington about that sometime and see if we can do more of that. That would be a very small tool. I like that idea though, in that mix, a little crossover. It's a great idea.
These are all really, it's a very good laundry list. I guess I would rank them. I really like the idea of somebody who's strong on media advocacy work. Obviously, we have the expertise of our friends at Baker Hostel, Tetler, in that regard, but having that, I definitely think having a younger person, whether it's a student or a recent grad, would be very helpful as we think about our future. So maybe somebody who had a good run on their campus and now is active wherever they've relocated. And I have a couple of things in mind there. So good list, and again, we'll proceed on this in conversation via email, throw out some names that fall under this list, and start putting together a plan of attack to bring them on as quickly as we can. So thanks on that. Moving forward. So last night I made a big point of talking about wanting to celebrate journalism and journalists at SPJ, and it's not just lip service that you do in a talk at dinner. I really think that that's a missing piece of SPJ. And I don't mean it in a kind of a lightweight, yay, cheerleading way. I mean really leveraging the power of what's happening at the grassroots level. And we've already heard some very tangible ways to make that happen. We have so many chapters that do amazing things. We see that in the reports that they submit every year. Yes, we see some holes where chapters are inactive or falling off the cliff, but we also do some really good stuff out in the field that I just don't think we share well enough with each other. And so I think this idea of freshening the programs in a box is a really good first step, and just taking last year's list of really cool programs that we've just recognized as chapters of the year or programs of the year, or the various designations, and making those available is one way to share information. So it's my hope that the regional coordinator cohort can help us think of other ways to celebrate the things happening at the local level, as well as the journalism at the local level. I think we all get a number of newsletters, and we have our own ways of tracking cool things happening in journalism, but especially when our members are involved, right? That they've got a really great new investigative project coming out of Oklahoma or Boise or what have you. Let's find a way to also celebrate what they're doing as professionals out there in the world. So we're talking with the RC folks about how we can bring that forward and share it in a way that is easy to access. Yes?
I believe that, long been said that journalists don't know how to promote themselves. In many cases, that is true. Our eyes, once it got started, our eyes were riveted at the Washington Post video last night. I think we need to contract with someone to create really compelling videos of all these stories that are being told and yet to be told. And there are some great university, university groups who are actually creating that. Gaylord, Cronkite. I mean, we've got students who are actually creating work for paid customers to tell their stories. So and they don't charge much. I think we need to look outside to figure out a way to tell this story. And I think we need video. I think we need visuals. I think we need just compelling stuff to talk about, what Arkansas is doing and what all these chapters are doing. And I think that would be really, really compelling.
Yeah, it's a heavy lift, right? But I think that is a next step in our digital age, that we don't do enough of that. We have one digital guy and he has to do everything for us, so it is a matter then of contracting out that. But yeah, when you go to some of these other groups and you see how they celebrate their members, and I always like to point to the Hogan White Awards that RTD&A do, they do a giant presentation, right? They got this great, totally built out video tribute to someone. They have the client do that, by the way. So if it's a CBS person getting that award, they go to CBS and CBS produces that in support of their winner. That's brilliant, right? I don't know if there's a charge involved, like the CBS folks, expect. But those are things we can learn. Learn from our friends in our partner groups, how they do stuff like that to really elevate the great things that are happening in the SPJ communities, worlds that we can put in front of members.
Sue's had her hand up for a while.
Here's a thought, building on that.
Yeah.
This is all you need to do your storytelling. And I think you know where I'm going with this. It would be cool to develop like a contest, a competition of your story, of your chapter, building it with this, because you're going to get some really cool elements. Anything you can do to get the excitement within the structure of the chapter, get it pushed out on the website, take it to social media. I think you've got it made right there, and it will save you money. We're in a situation where money is tight right now.
That's a great idea.
So I
won't have the ability to do that.
This is all you
Let's
need.
make it a competition.
Yep.
Then don't contract it out. Ask members, can anybody volunteer? The person who did that volunteered.
With all due respect, I know that even putting together the Washington video, because Steve came and asked, it was tough getting students. We have this policy, I can't speak for Gaylord, but we get asked all the time on campus, oh, your students can get experience by doing this. They're busy doing other stuff. If they're going to get paid for it, Tess, you know what I'm talking about. I don't know about any other schools. We get hit all the time with those kinds of requests. The kids are talented, and they can do it, but they don't give it away.
But I wasn't talking about students.
But professionals don't have time either.
Yeah. These ideas are all worth considering, and that's something that it can be a contest, right? And you're going to get great work.
Yeah.
It can be a RC priority. We can figure out ways to we need to try some things and see what we can get some momentum on. Colin?
One of the other things that we talked about a lot at our committee, and one of them was about testimonials, member testimonials, specifically like how SPJ helped me. Really simple headshot, quote, where they're from, who they are, what they do, simple stuff. I actually talked to Lou about it also, to maybe get that in Quill on a regular basis, either online or in the magazine. And it would be similar to like a humans SPJ sort of thing. That's like that was the hashtag that we thought about. And so just to promote the benefits of how members are taking advantage of their SPJ.
Yes. And I know we've tried that in the past with limited success, right? Trying to get people to nominate someone who should be recognized. So it takes, these ideas all take care and feeding.
I remember the member of the month.
Constant returning to trying to get it off the ground until, again, there's some momentum and energy and it becomes a thing and people want to be, right?
I was on the committee when Robin did Member of the Month. And it was too much. That's more ambitious than what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about simple, like one quote, name, hometown, what they do, photo. That's it.
Yeah, and whatever you do, you've got to front load it. So, you've got to have 12 done before you start it out, so that you're not constantly trying to get something for the next month. So.
But I will need help, for sure.
Absolutely.
Because I can't just get everyone from New York.
I'm sure all the New Yorkers have wonderful SPJ stories, but you're right. But I do think that's a volunteer thing. It's not something we go, hey Jennifer, can you create this thing and keep putting it in leads week after week? We'll see if anybody wants to respond. Somebody's got to drive it, take ownership of it to make it happen. And of course, diversity geographically is important in all other respects.
Just to build on what Patty said, we've tried this several different ways in the past. One of the people you might want to talk to is actually Larry Messing, because he did it in connection with a membership drive. And he did the short, quick hit version that you're talking about. And so he reached out to board members because that was his immediate pool of people. That model might work better than some of the previous models that involved, I think, a little bit more volunteer time.
And that should live online on our website somewhere, those testimonials. They don't currently, as far as I can tell. So if they've already been created, we should get those online.
Good idea. All right, I'm going to move on to a couple other agenda items as we move toward public comment period here. And I'm kind of collapsing some agenda items. You'll see it's a little, my first meeting, a little messy on all this, but I'm getting there. So a few other things I just want to talk about. I think our partnerships are very important going forward. We have standing relationships with RTD&A, NAHJ, Google, Apple, Scripps, and others that I'm not remembering at the moment. It's not necessarily something we put on our chart. That's, again, as I said earlier, more of an executive director kind of relationship. But I do think that all of us as board members should be cognizant that we should and must be expanding our relationship with other groups. So I had a good suggestion from somebody, maybe it was you, Colin, as we look toward our next convention. We already have a convention partner, that's great. Going forward, there's some live conversations, but we all have different organizations who come into our orbit, and putting those out there and feeding them through the board to the staff to see what we might explore, who would be a key person to have a conversation with, what might that look like, are we talking about a convention partner, or a partner in some other way, or other kinds of services. Yeah. Bye. Thank you very much for being here. So that's one category that's on my radar thinking about. I have a note here, EIJ21 site. We know that we're in New Orleans. Yes, we know we're in New Orleans. And I guess I need a sense, maybe Jennifer, or Alex who's in the room could help us as well. Where are we in the calendar for having to pick the next year, and so on? How much should this board be thinking about that, and or are we waiting for an executive director before we can?
I don't know. Sorry, I probably answer those questions better.
Okay.
Or Alex.
Had we, Alex, could I call on you? Have we made any preliminary discussions about location after 21?
Wait, oh no, I'm sorry, 21 we moved to New Orleans.
Right.
We did do some preliminary research, we brought it to the board in April, however, on a few different sites, Philadelphia and I think a couple others. However, we decided to focus on moving to New Orleans in 2021. So you will have to consider certainly 2022 at the April board meeting. The question is whether you want to do two, whether you want to do 22 and 2023. Because we usually do go that far out.
All right, good to know.
But we do have the contract, of course, for 2021 anyway.
All right, thank you. Thanks for that. So, Matt?
So was there any thought to where in 22 or no?
Yeah, no, there was. I mean, I think the leading one was Philadelphia, but there were questions the board was not. Yeah, we wanted to reconsider. There were a lot of reasons. One was moving 21. We focused on one was we didn't have an option that we were 100% on.
The last time the board discussed this, there was no West Coast city on the rotation, so the board agreed that it's about every 5 years or so we go to the West Coast, and so 2022 is supposed to be a West Coast location. I very much hope we stick with that because geographic diversity for our members I think is really important.
Well, and I might add to that, we did look at several West Coast cities.
I'm with you there, Tess.
I might add, we looked at several West Coast cities, and the problem was price. Like Denver was one that was raised by a lot of people, and we looked there, and we weren't able to find a hotel at our price point. So I think that is the reason we didn't pick a 2022. We didn't. None of the proposals.
I think there's three board members here that are welcome that would love to make suggestions for West Coast cities. We can do that offline.
We'll return to that, and obviously that's a key task for the executive director to be involved in, and staff that's probably already have some research and data on that. Hillary?
Thank you.
And if you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure, Hillary Niles. This is, I just bring this up, it was something that a colleague from the West Coast mentioned to me. And so I have not independently verified this data, but she was looking at the past decade or so of the EIJs and said that there were only 2 that were on the West Coast. So I'm psyched, and she'll be psyched to hear that, that you're looking at West Coast. She also said that in the past 10 or 11 years, there have been no EIJs in Mountain Time. And so just when you're talking about West Coast, you might want to consider, not the actual coast.
Okay, pretty good. All right, just wanted to get a sense of how quickly that kind of decision comes rushing at us. So thank you for updates all on that. And the other topic that we just don't seem to talk enough about in SPJ, and I'd like to get your thoughts, is the continuing changes in the industry. We know that many of our colleagues have lost jobs, been downsized, moved into different identities, and I don't have any brilliant idea on this. It's just a topic that's always there. It's front and center all the time. In my market, Gatehouse is buying the Gannett newspaper. Somebody else is buying the Dayton Daily News. That's not good news for local journalists, probably, and I think that's happening, in many, many markets. So, I don't know what we do about it. I don't know if we can offer assistance that we're not at, right? What kind of, let me have Yvette and then Colin. So Yvette, yeah.
So I think our necessity, a lot of grassroots organizations have sprung up. There's Facebook's What's Your Plan B page. One of our speakers at this convention, Viola LeBay, had her conference wasn't specifically about that, I don't think, but her company is kind of like looking at what's beyond journalism type thing. So I think out of necessity that has happened. I guess our question is, as we consider the scalpel versus Swiss knife analogy, do we want to do something on this all our own, or do we want to partner perhaps with people who have started this? Because again, out of necessity, they've started groups.
Mm-hmm. Right. A small example would be there's many job boards out there for journalists, and we don't have an active job board. We don't seek listings ourselves, correct?
No, we do have jobs on the website that we contract for a company, and it's not very robust, but there are some there.
Right. So we might just revisit how that could be built out a little bit more with other links to other groups that have a really large offerings, more than let other people do some of this work. I think that's the beauty of thinking about our partnerships. It's not, partners are not just so we have money to do this. Partners might be pointer to help somebody. We discussed this earlier. They do a lot of great webinars. Can we piggyback with them? Can we partner with them? What does that look like? how do we execute that, put that in front of members. Other thoughts on, sorry, back here, and then Matt Hall.
Just real quick, the other thing we talked about was the hardship membership rate. Members who, they'll receive a 6-month dues waiver if they are laid off or have yet to secure full-time employment. This is something that was introduced last year, I think. And we actually we talked about it at our committee meeting, but we weren't sure if it was still active. It's not really well known amongst even our committee members. So I don't know if it's still available.
Right.
It's still online, but I don't know.
It's still online, it's still active.
We can still promote it as an option for people,
Yeah.
so they can still remain a member and apply for this dues waiver.
Right, so we launched that at a point where there were a bunch of layoffs announced in a short amount of time, and we wanted to be out front and offer some relief. So maybe when Gannett actually buys, or Gatehouse buys Gannett, that's another time we want to do that, or just watch the trends to put it in front of people again. But again, you talked about kind of doing a full assessment of what's on the website that relates to membership, and having it all kind of live in maybe a more logical place, and that could highlight that particular offering. Catherine. And since it's the first time you're speaking, would you introduce yourself?
Oh, okay. I'm Catherine Marcel from DC Pearl, freelance writer. Has anybody ever thought about a website that would be sponsored by SPJ where I guess anyone, but particularly laid off journalists, could, as they can, contribute stories, editing, sort of the joint effort. So while you're laid off, you're still getting some experience that you're not just throwing out there in a blog, but that this is an SPJ sponsored news service, news site, whatever. Maybe not able to pay people, but maybe
right. To allow them to continue to get exposure
as
to
they
their work.
can to do some.
If somebody does that, we could help them brand it. I don't think that I think it have to be volunteer-led, right? Yeah. I mean, it's a really good idea. I don't know that something like that exists. Your home for your journalism during your transition to your new job kind of site sounds really like a smart idea. Find us someone who wants to do that. We'll talk.
I don't know. I don't know of an organization that's doing that, but I do know a lot of journalists, transitioning journalists who do that, who still report news, who still basically through their own blogs and websites.
Yes, right.
But I don't know of an organization that does that, and
yeah.
I don't know if under our new grant member page we could link to some of these websites, but some of the certain.
But a site that publishes a wide variety of contributor work.
It's something to take a look at.
Yeah, interesting. Billy.
Well, to me, I was going to say that, regarding our strategic plan and my thoughts previously about our strategic plan, it kind of dovetails into the theme of protecting and empowering and uplifting journalism to protect the people who have lost their jobs. And I would say to Colin and Hillary, as you're forming this idea about local support for freelancers, I might also consider, while you're brainstorming that, do the same thing for journalists who are out of work or looking for work, or because they're not the same thing, but there are some similar themes as far as feeling isolated, feeling like you don't have a support network, feeling like you're on your own. We could create local programs with the human touch to bring those people in and to remind them that you don't have a working journalist job right now, but you are still a working journalist. So if we do that at the local level and at the personal level, I feel like that would be more valuable than anything we could do at a macro level.
Right. It could be an entry or a sub-entry in the programs in a box.
Yes.
That chapters could do something. Here's something you can do to help your local members. 20 people go out the door, like the Cincinnati Enquirer, what's over here, and then Lauren.
And yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That is absolutely a constituency of freelancers
in general, and, you know, certainly within the community, we field inquiries on a frequent and regular basis from staffers who are laid off and are trying to figure out what their next move is going to be and need to find some work in the meantime. And some of them end up staying freelance, and some of them freelance as a transition until they go to a full-time job. And I would be really psyched to work with other folks from SPJ on how we can package that type of the responses and the guidance and the support that we give those individuals. I would be thrilled to package that in a way that it could be made more accessible. So that'd be very exciting.
I'm sorry. I don't. Hand up, go Lauren, and then Matt.
I think these are all good ideas, and I just think it's something that the Strategic Planning Task Force should be looking at as they continue to build out their work and their recommendations for the board, because we're looking to ultimately answer the question, who are we and what are our main areas of focus going forward? So I think it's really important that any idea that comes up here be on the radar.
All right, Matt, back home.
I think this is a super healthy discussion. I'm glad we're having it. Two thoughts. I love the idea of some sort of to-do list or first aid kit for out-of-work journalists. Super, super important. But I would raise a note of caution. In San Diego, we tried to go through the effort of creating our own journalismjobs.com, and it's super labor intensive, and it takes a ton of energy, and eventually it falters of its kind of own inertia because you can't do that. And I didn't realize that we're paying for it. You said we're contracting for some of that.
Yeah, they actually give us money. I'm not really sure how it works. It's something Joe set up years ago, so.
Okay.
we
Is
can
it
check,
through
like-
journalismjobs.com?
No.
It's a company called Boxwood.
Right.
It's not great, it's okay, but there are companies doing it way better than we're doing it.
Yes,
And if
there's
we
a lot of
work with those
organizations who
companies-
have a staff member who monitors and you gotta keep those fresh or it's totally
Well, and
pointless.
there's a lot of journalists who do that either voluntarily as a labor of love or whatever. So I think a better use of our time than spending a lot of time and any money on that is just to have a link farm on our membership
I
site.
think
Since
that's-
here are the other people doing it. Here you can go.
If you want that link farm, sorry to interrupt, and we'll get to you. If you want that link farm, go to journalisttoolbox.org. There's been a journalism jobs page there for 23 years.
There you go. Thank you for your
Do you
service.
still-
Hold on there.
There you
Yeah.
go. You still maintain that and update it from time to time, take a look, make sure those links.
Twice a
are-
week.
All right. Well, see, this is, we have a lot of resources that we just don't all even know about, including your new president. So, here in the Zoom.
Well, is there a way to create like a widget that just has a feed of jobs that we can just add to our website and just, we don't have to update it. We don't have to update it, but whatever you're updating will just flow right onto our.
Yeah, I would be fine with that. We don't update that page often. It's when a new, journalismjobs.com, a bunch of other journal, RTDNA's jobs page, and so on there. Yeah, it gets updated from time to time, but we could have that feed show up prominently, just like the recent updates to Journalist Toolbox.
I know that there are others like Gorkana and Journalism Jobs. I think they have widgets that you can actually add.
30 links. Yeah, they can put on
And
their
they
site.
update themselves. They don't need to manage.
It's got an RSS feed in it.
All right, problem solved.
Patty.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Just a quick point of information, that job thing that we have on our site, we discussed it some years ago because frankly, it's a mercenary thing more than anything practical. Because since we get money for it, it's a stream of money. And Joe, we had a huge debate. Really, do you remember when we talked about this? In essence, there were members who were very upset because it was practical and basically useless. The truth was we got money from it. They paid us. You all have to decide whether the benefit of the bucks is worth the reputation and like this is a piece of crap.
Right, I'd like somebody
Depends
to.
on how much we get.
Right.
Well, that's
So
where
if
it
we can
came
have-
now.
If we can have the minutes reflect that we'd like a little more information about that contract, how it works, and we'll take a look at the the credibility of the information and whether it's problematic in any way. We don't want to put bad stuff, even if we're getting some amount of money, we don't want to put bad stuff in front of members, especially if we're sweeping all these other sites that are, producing current links.
Related to this discussion, just a little tidbit, we put like 3 or 4 jobs in leads every week.
Right.
Internships and things for the students, but then pro jobs and the pro version of leads too. We pulled from journals and jobs or people will send them to us, or we'll just look around for interesting ones. We try to make sure they're scattered from, across the country. And those links always get clicked on. There are some in leads that don't, but those always do.
So it's meant to be kind of a sample, like, here's something interesting, look at this one. If that just had one additional link that took us to somewhere else on the site that allowed people to go deeper into the existing job boards, I think that's the easiest solution to what we're talking about here. And then, and then make sure that there are other ways to get that. If somebody goes to our site and says, job search or job ads, and they. So, good, thank you. And that is the end of my bullet points here. I think I've gotten through all of that. And moving to the next, I'm sorry, was there anybody else who had the hand up? Thank you. So this is 7 on my list, which may or may not correspond with your list.
Patty, I would like to make a motion.
Yeah, please.
To amend the agenda to add 2 items. One is fairly pressing, been pressing for a while. The other one is, I think, a longer term discussion, but it needs to start today. The first agenda item would be a discussion of the database moving forward and some options that we need to explore there. And the second item would be longer term, because this could be a policy that's adopted and eventually a bylaw. But it would be a discussion of the limits of presidential powers for self-appointing moving forward. No offense to the 2 of you, but we need to explore that.
Okay, in terms of the database, I did expect we were going to talk about that under executive session contracts, unless there's any disagreement that it needs to be discussed in open session.
I feel that we have to have some things discussed in open session. Some people need to be heard here.
All right.
Unless we agree to bring them in for a bit during that, because I saw on the agenda it was EIJ contracts.
Yeah, I should have just taken off contractual business.
Yeah, and we will have to discuss some of that in there, because I do want to see that contract. We haven't seen it, and we asked for it 5 months ago.
Okay. Can I get a sense of the room? Is this a executive session where we invite in, say, Billy, for input, or is it something we should do in open session? I'm on shaky ground here. Is our contract with Blackbaud something we can discuss openly?
So can this be one of those issues that we split, that we have as much in open session as we can, and then do the rest in closed session?
Sure.
And I just also wanted to make sure you didn't forget agenda item number 7, or wasn't shared something.
Yeah, that's where I was going next. So, Mike.
And it can fall anywhere.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go ahead with number 7 on the foundation appointments, and quickly I'll give you number 8, which is other appointments. Sense of the room, do we want to go to public comment and come back to the 2 things you just said in new business?
Let's say public comment first.
Yeah, I think so, because some folks here are,
Particularly
I've invited a couple people to come expressly. So that'll become, we're going to hold a new business, we'll do new business, the 2 things Mike Riley just brought up, and then as needed, go into executive session for some portions of those discussions. So going back to number 7, ratification, I'm sorry, you made a motion.
Yeah, I made a motion.
Do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
Thank you. All those, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Any, what's the other word? Abstentions. That's the first time I've actually had to say that sequence of words, so. And it was a late night. Okay, thank you very much. So moved, and we'll come back to that quickly then. Ratification of foundation board members. So we have already let our foundation friends know that myself and Matt would be serving on the foundation board, and provided a name of a candidate as our 3rd appointee who did not win election to the seat sought. So I have to now ask for, I have to ask a next person to fill that spot.
Actually, Erwin, a point of information.
Yes.
He wanted me to let you know that the foundation board did approve the bylaws change so that we are allowed to appoint any SPJ member
Yes.
as an SPJ representative. It does not have to be a city member.
Right, I understand that.
Okay,
I was
just wanna make sure you're
at that meeting. It's just that the person, I need to rethink that.
Of course. I
Okay,
just-
so
you
I'm
wanted
just going to
make
say,
sure
at
you
this,
knew.
at this point, myself and Matt will serve on the board, but there will be at least one additional person asked to serve on, but I just need to follow up because of late breaking news from the.
Can I recommend that that person be under the age of 35?
You can.
Well, and also maybe not limit to necessarily one person because of the change in the rule.
Sure.
It can be at least two.
Thank you. In terms of the, yes, Andrew.
I'm sorry, I may not have been paying attention. Are you saying you're choosing the appointments to the foundation board?
That's what we were talking about, yes.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry I haven't had an opportunity to talk through this with you, so can we put that aside and just let the board know? At this point, it's myself and Matt, and I need to.
I guess so this is the one that I was asked to serve on, but no longer?
I asked you because when you were not opposed for the position, I invited you, so I'm not uninviting you, I just haven't had a chance to talk to you about that. So that's why I'm saying I was needed to talk to you about that and make sure that all is well on that, okay? No, I'm not uninviting you, man, just.
It sure sounded that way.
No, I haven't had a chance.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, and this new measure that we can invite people off the board is new. So these are all kind of moving parts. I'm trying to wrap my brain around, so thank you for your patience on that. Thanks. And next are committees. I'd like to review where we stand on committee leadership for the coming year. First of all, Jane Criminaro has agreed to serve as our RC chair. We may call it an RC caucus. Jane and I will talk about the pros and cons of calling it a caucus versus a committee. But this is the new way that we'll work with all those fine folks. Rebecca Aguilar, as you know, is going to continue on diversities, on the diversity committee, leading the successful diversity fellows program, repeating that, and perhaps some other priorities. Sue Kopen-Kachev has agreed to chair the awards and honors committee. And we thank her for that. Bob Becker has agreed to stay on with bylaws. For Freedom of Information Committee, Danielle McLean, who had led that committee, asked to be relieved of her duties because she has some other pressing matters. And so I've asked Paul Fletcher to lead that, and he's agreed to do that and is super excited to move into that role. Nagit Lamore will remain as our LDF chair. I expect that we'll have Rebecca Aguilar as the chair of finance, which is the usual way we handle it, that the secretary treasurer is the chair of finance, but I have not asked her that or let her know that that's expected in that position. Lynn Walsh will stay on as ethics chair. Colin has agreed, Colin's still in the room, thank you. Colin has graciously agreed to remain at the top of the membership committee. I believe, Alex, are you still in the room?
Yes.
You were willing to stay on as the nominations committee chair. I think we talked about that at some point.
Yes.
Okay. Sounded a little tentative, but we're going to go with the yes. Thank you. I spoke with Mike Savino about staying on his resolutions, and he's considering it. So that was a soft yes or a soft no. We'll see. I think we all know that Letitia Steffen will take over the J Education Committee. Tess Fox staying on for Gen J Committee. And the committee I would like to talk about creating would be one that supports EIJ engagement. So in my experience on the board, it's been two key board members who have been have taken the lead on EIJ, the president and the president-elect. And I found as president-elect that it was a bit scary. It felt like I was making a lot of decisions without consulting with the board, particularly on the programming front. And I only learned late into the process, I don't know why I didn't think of this, but the RTD&A friends had a committee that they took, that looked at all the programming proposals early in the process, as opposed to me late in the process when we made many decisions, and then I shared it with the board, and people were like, wait, what about this? What about this? We have too much of this, too little of this. Like, oh, gosh, I guess I should have asked people. So I think that we need a small committee that could assist on that as we work out our relationship with our TD&A. They have a very distinct and very effective way of working with us, but I think we just need to build out a little bit more of a team. The folks in Washington are super excited that we're going to be there and have a lot of great ideas, and so perhaps a Washington chapter person would be a key person to have on that committee. Matt and I would like to talk about that. I don't really have any, I don't know if we need a motion to create a committee. Can anybody give me guidance here?
I believe you can appoint any committee that you want under bylaws.
No, you do not need a motion.
All right, very good. So I'd like to create this committee and talk with Matt about how to compose the committee. Not trying to give board members more to do. I think this is an opportunity, again, to reach out to our friends in Washington, maybe reach out to some of the chapter leaders who became very engaged to the society through the group that Jonathan Make put together, and other ideas that you might have about how to find a range of folks on that committee. Yes?
Can I just make I dropped this on a couple of people, I need to talk about this really. Since it is a political year in Washington, timing can be incredibly against us, or maybe doing the planning ahead of time. My recommendation is that you reach out immediately to former President Barack Obama to have him address the convention on the issue of the press. I think it's a timely matter even then, but with his schedule, we got to get in now.
That's a really good idea. I'll just say one thing. This year, we thought about the idea, we floated the idea of trying to get George Bush as a Texas resident, and there was strong feelings from conference organizers that that was too complicated. When you bring in a president or an ex-president, you have to have Secret Service. It makes it very complicated because you have to clear the room for like 24 hours, and Alex, jump in if you can help on this.
I was going to say, it's not only complicated, it's expensive, because actually the organization hosting the event is responsible for the cost of all that Secret Service security. It is,
isn't that crazy?
It's something we've talked about, and Dana and I have talked about too this year. I'm not saying not to do it because of the opportunity of being there in 2020, but I'm saying that the price tag is very high, and it will be the EIJ sponsor's responsibility, which should include RTD&A. The other thing to remember is that NABJ and NAHJ have their conference in Washington about a month before us, and that will be right after the conventions, and we do expect that they will possibly be asking the actual candidates. I mean, in other words, Bono would be terrific, he's always a draw, but they might actually ask the Democratic candidate. I don't know if they're going to come do both, like NABJ and NAHJ, and then a month later come back and do EIJ, but that's something that Dan and I have discussed.
Do you know, does a candidate require Secret Service?
Yeah. First of all, once they become the official candidate, they have to.
Yes, they are. They're signed. They're there.
Yeah.
Did you ever get the dollar amount for what that would cost? Or
a lot. I mean, it's
6 figures or like 40?
I don't actually know how much, but it would be a lot.
Last time we did it was Dan Coyle.
Yeah.
When he spoke to the convention many years ago.
Was he running at the time?
He was.
Sitting?
He was former, I think, at that point.
No,
he was vice president still at the time.
So I do think it's worth exploring and exploring early.
Yes, that's the key. It's the timing.
And pricing it out and seeing what's doable, given the facility we're using and so forth. Be that, and then.
Yeah, so I was going to mention, ABJ does this routinely. Frankly, some of our competitors do have kind of these bigger, splashy, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but these bigger, splashy ideas, and people come to speak. There is cost associated with it, but this might be an opportunity for us to find a donor in particular that could underwrite this. I think if we had Barack Obama or someone in that category, it would really help this organization, help EIJ shine a bit, I think it is something we should really look into and try to find a donor underwriter.
It would seem like a lack in the programming if we were to have no prominent politician
Correct.
on the schedule in 2020.
Correct.
So, Matt.
I would just say, in terms of protocol, two things. One is the optics of having Barack Obama come in, Trump's term, in our organization, and the media in general is painted as liberal elites is a little troubling. So if we're going to do that, I would suggest we ask the president first, and the Democratic nominee, and then the ex-president.
I think you do it at the same time.
Right, no, that's what I'm saying, obviously. But then giving some thought to another politician, obviously super smart. Costs, you have to be part of that. But when we talk about underwriting, I'm leery of jumping into who we pick and then finding a sponsor for that when many people, including Colin here and others in this room, were very upset about sponsorship and partnerships. And that would, if you thought Sinclair and Fox were, and Coke were issues, bringing in a politician of a D or an R and then having someone underwrite that would open up a whole can of worms. So I just think we should go into that discussion with our eyes wide open.
It needs to be a discussion,
Catherine.
As a member of the National Press Club, I keep cogitating on how we can get a session in that ballroom because it is so historic. The building is so historic, and we could even do a few little tours the way I do for students there. But also the structure of the National Press Club, they know how to do this. I mean, one of their big deals is to get prominent, very prominent politicians in there. And on occasion, we had presidents. I think we could at least float the idea to work with them to get, to at least try to get the candidates in there, saying we're going to have all these journalists coming in.
Right.
And if
they are well versed on the ins and outs.
Yes.
Of course, the size of the problem is who gets to go, right? Do we make that a ticketed event? You can, for an extra a la carte $100, you could go and be an audience with the candidates at the press club. I don't know.
I still say no to that.
That would be very controversial.
Say no to that. That'd be more controversial than the donor.
Here's an idea too that might kind of at least assuage some of my concerns about the optics of politics. So much has been made over the years about a shield law. It might be interesting to get someone on either side of that argument to have a discussion about it, whether it's worth having or not. I mean, that would be super interesting. I guarantee you'd fill that room, especially if it was what you're talking about, you know.
So lots of good ideas will come to the surface, and as you go home and think about your highlights from your EIJ, we did a member survey right at the end through the app.
Yes.
Yeah, on what people
I
like,
don't think
what
it's
kind
gone
of
out yet.
attendance numbers are and so forth. Obviously 2020 in DC, there's a lot of good ideas already out of the gate. What would be appropriate there? It would be thrilling to have a presidential presence. So I like this idea, but there's some inherent problems of size and cost and so forth. All right, I think that I have finished what I would like to, and I'd like to open it up to public comment. So if you would like to be recognized, stand up, say your name, and join us. We've already heard from a good number of folks. I did in particular, if nobody's raising their hand, I did in particular ask Catherine to come and brief us on her work with PIOs. This is something that's been please, if you want to come and stand closer to the board, that'd be great, or you can take a seat.
Do you mind if I pull it?
That's fine, thank you very much. So we're going to start by just reminding us all.
Okay, I'm Catherine Foxall. I'm from the DC chapter. SPJ has done a ton of work on the issue of the cultural shift of forcing prohibiting people from speaking to reporters and all kinds of organizations, agencies, businesses, et cetera, without going through often a PR office. There's also other, iterations of those kinds of controls. We Carolyn Carson did 7 surveys over about 5 years. They are absolutely foundational. I mean, nobody had looked at it from that side of the issue, from the journalism side of the issue. We went to the White House in 2015. That's, you know, I get depressed when I think about it, but anyway, we did it, and we have a website on it. We have a whole host of resolutions on it. Yesterday, we passed a resolution that talked about authoritarianism. And I really like to hear from anybody and everybody about this issue and about what's going on around the country and in your operation. But as far as I can tell from all the feedback I get, this tsunami is just continuing. A few years ago, I was shocked that a university would do this. Now I don't hear anything but universities doing it, and doing it very harshly. Just as one example that I think really shows where we are today and the deep trouble we're in journalism and as a society, you can't get into FDA with a shoehorn. I mean, they don't let people in that they don't want. I mean, they're very straightforward about that. They don't, so we've been doing a whole heck of a lot of coverage of FDA that is from their releases or their briefings or their meetings. In other words, if FDA doesn't say it, we don't know it. I think we just now got our comeuppance, something to measure ourselves against. This book came out in May. It's an investigative journalist. She worked for 10 years on it. It took her 10 years. And it basically says FDA cannot or does not control the safety and quality of drug manufacturing. It's just a basic societal function. And it's literally putting millions of people at risk. It's a basic societal function that is just not happening. Catherine Evan has been on the New York Times bestseller list, and she's testifying before Congress. I still don't think it's getting enough attention. But please read it, but read it as a story of a journalism disaster. We didn't know this. We knew FDA had a meeting. FDA released a report. In the FOIA committee yesterday, I could do a list of about 15 asks, but we focused on 2 things yesterday. And one is that as soon as possible, we do a letter to Congress that is just as sharp as we know how to say Congress and the rest of the public often does not know what is going on because of these issues, because of these controls. That we have seen it as a cultural shift, and we have to tell the public and Congress, you don't know what is going on. They have a lot of feel up there about this. I mean, there's a lot of tension between Congress and the executive branch. And the other thing I particularly want to ask is that SPJ commit, because we don't talk about this, to never do anything that looks at free press widely, not a trust project or a meeting or a speech or whatever, without talking about this and explaining it and telling people where they can go for further explanation. I have a personal ask that I sort of get whatever SPJ wants to call it, an invite or a suggestion that I do a white paper or a book. And of course, SPJ wouldn't have to endorse it or publish it. In the end, they didn't want to, but it would just be helpful in terms of getting interviews, that kind of thing. I could say I'm doing this on behalf of SPJ. I think we're just in a bad place for journalism. But I think SPJ is the organization to raise our hands and say this is happening. And I, hope we do that.
So if I'm hearing, Catherine, here kind of two specific things that you might want our board input on is number one, a letter to Congress that would be authored by you under the umbrella of our FOIA committee, essentially.
Yeah, that we would draft it and you would sign it. And as we did with the White House, the way we got into the White House was we got the signatures of up to 60 organizations.
Right. And that was when Joe Skeel was still executive director?
Yes.
Right? And is that a group we still have any kind of communication with? It's an active group. When statements are being drafted, we'll reach out and find.
Exactly. Just one thing I forgot to say. The top purpose of that, in my mind, would not be the letter to Congress itself, but a press release that would go to every newsroom in this country, in particular, to begin to let people out there know that no, it's not just you. It's not
right.
It's not just your feeling.
And why is it now an optimal time to pursue this? Is there a piece of legislation that's pending? Is there a move afoot to further institutionalize PIO-controlled communication? What's
the only thing I would say is, I hate to say this, but we're going to have to be. We have not educated even journalists about this, that this is a cultural shift and that it's not good. And certainly the public doesn't understand. We're going to have to say this 500,000 times. So, and we need to get started. I mean,
no,
this
I
literally
agree,
is millions of lives.
But timing is key here, right? We need something to hang it on, some reason for people to pay attention to it. It's your lifelong pursuit to get attention to this issue, but I think communication-wise, hanging it on something is perhaps more effective.
There is a scientific integrity bill before Congress, which the resolution yesterday addressed.
Okay.
I think that in one way, that legislation, which is supported by the Union of Concerned Scientists, is important because it makes a statement that these controls on media are not such a good thing, which is big because they teach staff coming into Congress that it's essential that you shut everybody up except going through the PR apparatus. So I think it's big. We could try to hang it on that. But I hope we would really talk about the bigger issue.
Right, I get you. Let me ask one other thing. Yeah. And also the idea of a white paper, is that something you've, has this organization had such things in the past where we sponsor, underwrite, support? Is there some philosophical reason we wouldn't want to do that? To to endorse essentially by our, this is kind of a new topic. I don't know. I've never seen it on years. We don't have any other white papers like on our site, for example, reference.
So Patty, that may be something again to go to the strategic first, who are we and what do we do?
Right.
I just wanted to make note of the time, it's already 11 o'clock.
Thank you.
And I know Mark has a presentation.
Right, thank you.
I have a
So,
comment.
yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. So it's not related to this, it's just public comment period, right?
Well, wait a minute, let's finish up Catherine's.
Okay, let's finish.
Haston, and this person will be talking, if you introduce yourself.
The bill you're talking about, does that have sponsors from both political parties? The bill you're talking about, the scientific bill?
I'm not absolutely, it has an impressive number of sponsors.
Okay, so as long as there's at least one from each party, I thought maybe we could try to invite some of the sponsors of the bill to speak at our convention next year. That could kind of be a hook for us. They would be. That was my vote.
Have you proposed EIJ sessions on PIO issue in the past? And have
We had in Baltimore,
Okay.
we had a session, and it was pretty much packed, and it actually, unfortunately, pulled from the James Wisen session. That was, I was kind of embarrassed, but that did happen.
Gotcha. So two things on the table here. Does anybody feel the need to move on this, to create a motion to endorse a letter or not endorse a letter? Any discussion?
I would say the FOIA committee is on this. I mean, Paul is excited about this.
Okay. Well, if nobody feels compelled to make a motion, I guess I would say please apprise us. Let's get that letter before us and talk with our communications expert here on optimal ways to get attention for that, right? So I know you have a lot of other things on your mind that you're working on, but in the interest of time, I'd like to return to public comment. Other folks here who have would like to offer any other points. Yes, thank you, Paul.
So this is going to be difficult for me to say. I didn't have a chance to do it. After yesterday's delegate meeting, I felt completely disrespected. So did our friends from Chicago, whose resolution was also tabled. We had both prepared a great deal to discuss and debate our ideas in a delegation format. I proposed my resolutions not for myself, but on behalf of the people who could not be at EIJ and could not be in the room that we were in. Members back home in New York, members of my own committee, people in Chicago and California and Florida, many others I've heard from, are upset about the sponsorship problem that we have. I've sought out feedback from a broad base of different people to try to inform me on what I did, what my actions were at this time. It's been terribly upsetting to me hearing people around saying to ignore this problem that we have. I've heard leaders of our organization say that. And they say it's not as big a deal as you claim. They're not hearing it from that many people. Well, honestly, who are they talking to? Who are you not hearing this frustration from? Are they only talking to people in this silo of SPJ leadership? Is there a disconnection between the leadership and the membership on the ground? Journalists that are working hard every day to be objective, fair, and ethical. Members of the largest SPJ chapters are really upset. And they didn't have the privilege to be delegates. They didn't have the privilege to be here at this conference. I did, though. And I wanted to do something. I wanted to let the people that have communicated to me how upset they are know that I am listening. And I wanted to at least start a debate about it. But and not everyone that was here earlier is here this foot. It was pushed aside. I didn't want it to be swept under the rug and not confronted, but that's what happened. I was actually ready to walk in here this morning and resign. over this. I thought my membership efforts were going to be hopeless without letting our members know and our prospective members know that we're working on this publish. A task force is one thing, but we've tried that already, and it didn't go anywhere. And in my grad school studies, I learned in a time of crisis, a big, bold organizational change is the only solution. So anyway, I'm not resigning. I'm still here, I'm working. If you'll have me, if you'll have me to continue to stay on. Hearing our fellows yesterday was really reassuring to me. I had the brief honor to grace the same stage as Terry Anderson, Maria Reza, Nick Utt. These are amazing people, and I was regretfully underdressed. Sorry about that. But Terry Anderson reminded us that journalism is something not to be treated as a business. It's a public trust. And that is our role as a society. Maria Reza told us that we need to do everything we can to hold the line before it's too late. So I'm going to stay. I'm going to try to hold the line. I'm going to try to do what I can to get out there and remind our members that we're continuing to protect the public trust. And we've been doing it for 110 years. And won't compromise our values. And I want to make sure that they know that we are still fighting for them and what they do every day. And I will, even though we didn't do it in a delegation, in a public format like I wanted to, with the other delegates, I'm still going to do it as much as I can and however I can. So I just wanted to put that in.
Thank you very much for your comments, appreciate it. This does remind us that yesterday during the delegates meeting, we passed a measure to create a sponsorship task force that will be populated primarily by non-board members. I believe the resolution has the provision that one board member will be on that. So thank you for your thoughts on that. And the minutes will reflect your comments. So what else? Yes.
Thank you for staying. I know how emotional this was for you. I know how difficult it was for you. Thank you. I wasn't a delegate. I didn't get a chance to speak myself yesterday, which was frustrating. The first time I've been here and haven't been a delegate. I always stand up and speak because it's an important thing. One of the things that the strategic task force will be looking at is the whole delegate system, whether it's antiquated and updated, how to get more voices to be able to speak. So that's one thing. I could go on, but I appreciate it working again.
All right, thanks very much, Andy Schatz.
I wanted to say two things, but I'm going to say three. One is, as I mentioned during the previous board meeting here, that I would talk to Caroline, and I did, about the Greater Charlotte chapter, and she clarified what that email was. It was actually the treasurer of the chapter contacting headquarters saying, we have no chapter anymore. We would like to hand over our money. What's the procedure? So she is getting the ball rolling on that. She actually didn't know the procedure, so she asked. And it's essentially just the chapter gives its money to headquarters, and it can be added to the general fund unless you have some other preference. I think it's about $700. I would like to share one thing here because I didn't really know any other good way to do it. This is something from the awards committee. We talked about changes to the contest, but one of the things that we'd like to do for next year is about the podcast category. It was something that we added last year, and we added it when I called Jonathan Enslin and said, we want to add this. What do you think? Let's hash out some language. And he did. He helped. He added it at the same time with the New Jersey Pro chapter. So we added it. It's a popular category, probably behind the curve in doing it. but I think that it's entirely appropriate for next year to name the podcast category after John. And that's something that we can help make sure that his name and his legacy endures. That's all I was going to say, but I want to say a third thing based on what Colin said. I don't necessarily agree with all of the ideas that the opponents have raised from chapters, but I really respect their passion on this issue. And I agree with Colin that I don't think they have been respected enough. I was a supporter of that motion yesterday for the task force because I really think that we need to try this again. I don't think the first time brought in opponents. I mean, we had public hearings or whatever, but my first call when we had that first task force formed would have been to Chicago. I probably would have called LA second, maybe New York third. I was discouraged that we didn't do that. And here we are all over again. We say we hashed this out, but we didn't. We just gave it lip service. So I would like to see us take a serious attempt at it. I think it could be pretty messy. You get all the people into one room. I know what I say, and it probably won't agree with what Colin says or with what Ben says, but it really needs to be done, or we're just going to be doing this every year. So, sorry, Colin, it didn't work out that way. I kind of had a sense that it was going to happen because the order was strategic. It was, if that passes, the rest of the stuff isn't going to happen, so we can just talk about it. I don't know if that's great, but we're kind of limited in what we have capacity for at our business sessions. In a way, I think it kind of sucks. We have a 2-hour window. We start 20 minutes in. We have other resolutions that don't amount to much, and we have to hurry through everything else.
I mean, we spend so much time on the naming, and we're not talking about the real issues that members have with the society. Even our member survey for strategic planning said that the members don't want to change the name. No one is asking for that. Only Koretsky, and he said, oh, he came up to the mic, he's like, oh, I didn't have anything to do with this. And then the Arkansas president comes up and says, it was great when Michael reached out to me and asked me to present this.
Well, no, that was their idea. They came to him and said, are you doing it? He said, no. They said, okay, we want to do it. That's legit. But, you know, we're trying to hurry through stuff that we come together once a year, we don't have that chance to do. So I feel bad that you feel disrespected because you put a lot of time into it. You disseminated it early.
And my friend from Chicago did too.
Yeah. So sorry that's happening.
Okay. Time is ticking away.
Thank you.
And I really don't, and I understand your passion on this. Let's just take one last comment on this. And I do want to acknowledge that we are going to create this task force with due haste. Don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but the resolution did call for some structure, suggested some structure, and we definitely want people with differing points of view and dedication to seeing it through. So, sorry, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Robert Elder. I'm president of the Chicago Headline Club. I was not actually going to speak, but I also felt compelled after Andy and Colin. So yeah, we were disappointed that we weren't sort of allowed to speak as well. We had sort of positioned ourselves near microphones, and you know, we're ready. I had someone pop up in front of me before the resolution was finished reading. So it felt not only that there was a strategic order, but it felt preordained. And there's significant disappointment from your largest chapter. This is a huge issue that is impacting our membership. It just felt orchestrated and not in the spirit of this organization. So I will leave that. I know we have brief amount of time here. Separately, and I've talked to many of the folks here. This is a separate issue, but this is public comment. We had 6 delegates here. 3 of us just did not get ballots for the May election. I'm going to talk with my board and see how many people also didn't get them, but it's a concern. In a time where a lot of us are worried about our rolls being accurate, Chicago's is definitely not accurate. We've been asking for an audit. The fact that we didn't get ballots, I'm just wondering how many people didn't get ballots and didn't know that they didn't get ballots. So that's all. I know we were trying to move on, but I wanted to publicly say
Thank you, appreciate that input. So, Hillary, you have one more?
Oh, different topic.
Okay, let's, thank you, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So, let me get to the right spot in my notes here. So I just wanted to be here and communicate on behalf of the Freelance Community Board how much we appreciate the responsiveness from Alex and Patty, and also Larry and Basharat when it came to creating space for the community to be able to offer programs here for our members, even though we didn't have any sessions on the schedule. I think that it was really successful, and it couldn't have happened without that support and responsiveness. So we all really appreciate it. I'm also totally psyched to be in touch with you, Colin, and I'm really glad you're staying on, because I really appreciate the outreach that you did to get in touch with me, and how much you see that the freelance constituency within our profession is a real growth opportunity for SPJ, and a really important constituency within the profession, and we're working hard to make sure that we provide resources so that freelancers can work successfully and help keep the industry afloat. So we're excited about that. I also, can you remind me who the diversity chair is? Because I didn't catch it when you went down the list. She's still, okay, awesome. So I want to work with her too. I'm hoping to coordinate with the, work more on the regional level. And I love your board liaison idea. I'm really excited about that and finding out who it's going to be. So I'm excited about that and your focus on communication. I don't know what the onboarding is like for chapter leaders and for committee chairs. I have started to realize how ad hoc my onboarding was as the chair of the community. Mm-hmm. And I think that for the first couple of years that I've been chair, first year or so, this is my second year, I was mostly just sort of like focusing on getting to know the community and the other board members and figuring out our internal processes within the community. And now my focus is really, as my report stated, really learning how to integrate with the rest of the organization. But my suggestion would be that if there is not wicked formal, but a little bit, deliberate onboarding process for chairs, that the community chairs could be included in that. And if there's not, then I would be happy to help develop one. So that's one suggestion. Also, I have I guess before I make the request, just a question or a request to have a conversation about how the board communicates with chapter leaders and with committee chairs. And maybe it would be appropriate for community chairs to be looped into those communications as well. Just a suggestion that I would be happy to talk about. And also, hopefully I'll be able to stay for the Black Fog conversation, because I have a lot of key interest in that.
That's next. I think that we can move out of the public comment period now.
Great.
Thank you for your and thank you for your service to the freelance community. So does anybody need to take a break first of all?
Can I just,
Been in the
before
room
we
a long
take a
time.
break,
Yeah.
just really quickly,
Sure.
to address some of the comments here?
Sure.
I would like to make a motion, and I would like to make a suggestion to you. The motion would be that we get a report from staff fully detailing what happened with this year's election, so we understand what did happen, what were the failures, what were the corrections, and we get a sense of that. And then my request would be, I defer to you on the one board member that you appoint to the sponsorship committee, but I would humbly ask that you consider me, and I will volunteer for that, because I think what these guys are saying is super important, and we need to certainly not pay lip service to what our members are saying. And I'm happy to be the lone voice in that room with a bunch of people who are pissed off at the national board.
And I'd like to second Matt's motion.
Very good. So the motion is?
The volunteering was separate, but the motion is that we get a detailed report on the election.
Do you have a second on that? Sorry, motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any opposition? All right, very good. Just to wrap up the task force that's being called for on sponsorship, I think one of the first tasks for that group, whoever is on it in total, is collecting a lot of information. And so I'll begin working with our TTNA about what they consider proprietary or not, because I think more information about how it all works will be essential to the conversation. So, all right, let's move back to the agenda. And we had a motion that we already approved from Mike to talk about Blackbaud. So, Mike, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, yeah, just a little overview, and then I'll kind of throw it out to the group here to kick around. Back in April, we had a motion that we passed unanimously. Moving forward, that we would not sign a Blackbaud contract until Billy O'Keefe had appropriate time to spend with it hands-on, not watching videos, anything like that. We since found out that that contract had already been signed by someone, and Billy, to this date, has still not had hands-on with Blackbaud. Larry's had a little time with it, Caroline's had a little time with it. Billy has not had the hands-on experience that we put forth in April. So that has not been met. A lot of us on the board have talked about this, just, over beer, wine, and God knows what else. There might be other options here, and I would like to see, for the entire board to see, by the end of this week, the Blackbaud contract in full, and see what our options are there. And the second point, there are some options here that we could build this in-house. And I know this is something that Joe Skeel has opposed in the past. And I love Joe. He's great. One thing you need to understand is we can build it in-house with open source code. It will work. It will do all the things that you want us to make it do. We've talked about possibly bringing in a consultant to work with Billy on that. It would be very, very, very low cost compared to what we'd be paying for a company that would do it for us. There's also no guarantee that Blackbaud will exist in a year. Digital companies come and go, like snowflakes. They melt away sometimes. And then where are we left? An example of that is, I rebuilt a website at Arizona State for their Cronkite News website, very similar to Capital News Service, what Sue worked on for many years. And as I built the site, I wrote a primer on how it works. 4 people have held my job since I left there. There's never been an issue because they knew what to do when something breaks. We could do the same thing. We can develop and have a little list of what needs to be done should Billy, God forbid, leave, hit by the proverbial bus. It's kind of wins a lot of, yeah.
It's a weird spot, not a bus.
But do donate. But anyway, if something happens that we lose a team member, that we still have some layers in place and a guidebook in place. And I'd be happy to help with writing that. And, we need to have Larry, Caroline, as a part of this discussion, we need EE. But there's other options I think we could have on the table. A lot of it depends on the contract and what the out is with that and what we could possibly negotiate. I've been in those positions where I've had to negotiate my way out of those types of contracts. It's not easy, but it can be done. And that's something to consider. So I'm throwing that all out there, and let's, bat around real, briefly, and then we'll get to some of the other business items.
Lauren? I'm sorry, you did make a motion. Have you made that motion yet?
No, I haven't made a motion. I want some discussion on it, and then we'll throw a motion together.
I wholeheartedly endorse the need for us to see this contract. I'm the one that brought the motion forward at the board meeting in April, and we were not told the contract had already been signed. The previous board asked for that contract at its date. No board members have seen that contract. I think that's critical. Without knowing what's in the contract and without knowing what the outlaws would be, none of us can make a recommendation about whether we try to make Blackboard work or not. But at the very least, and I don't know how to make this happen because it hasn't happened from April. I guess Larry, as the current project lead, I want him to be required within a week from returning to office, because I know they get a couple days off, incredibly well deserved after a fantastic EIJ. 1 week to get building access in there, not a demo, but for him to actually be able to get into it and having contact at Blackbaud to be able to ask questions and get information. Because I know the upfront users are Larry and Caroline, the building's the one who understands the back end, and if it's gonna work for all of our needs. We have the contest platform, we have fundraising, and we have membership. We have had membership problems. My first time on a professional chapter board was 1996 for Greater LA Pro, and I'm hearing the same complaints now I heard in 1996. We have to fix this.
So if I can ask Billy to weigh in with just some information, we have a signed contract that dates back to, we'll say, April, is that correct?
I believe February.
February.
Okay.
Allison.
I don't know, I haven't seen
February.
it, and I kind of found out by accident that it was signed.
Right, and have we paid for said contract?
I feel like we paid something in June, but again, I don't know.
That's information I think we need to get as well. The contract, where are we in this contract physically? And when we say we have a contract, do we have the actual product? I mean, do we have it?
To my knowledge, we do not have a product installed.
Right.
I
An
certainly
agreement
do
that
not
we may or
have
may
it.
not have paid for to go forward. And I would like to know if we make a different direction, if there'd be any kind of separation fee, right? If at some point in April we indicated or signed a contract to not go forward, what's the cost of not going forward? And then as to your motion, does anybody else have questions on, or Lauren's suggestion at this point, what we're
I'm happy
actually
to make a
asking for?
motion.
Let's keep talking, yes.
I think that whatever information we find out, I don't know if there's a reason why we would have to wait until April contractually or just because of board history. I feel like we need to deal with this before April.
Oh, absolutely.
The references to the previous April.
Oh, okay,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, okay, Matt?
I don't want to cut off discussion, but to speed things along, I don't even know that we need a motion. I just think the consensus is clear that we need the contract immediately, and Billy needs access immediately. And maybe Mike can be a point person, or Patty can be, I don't know, whoever you delegate to be a point person.
I would like, if Mike has
Ask
the
someone on the board to
ability
be
to be a
a
point person, yeah, just, I just stay apprised of it, please.
Well, and not only that, we need a board update, we should take a time certain
Well,
for
let's-
that board update.
We'll come to a schedule here in a minute. Okay, yes,
It's
Jennifer.
my understanding, transparent conversations in the office, that we may have paid some a while ago, but there's still a big chunk that needs to be paid. And we're overdue paying it, and so Blackbaud's kind of saying, well, we're not giving you the product until you pay us. And we're saying, well, we want.
So we can't give a trial run unless we cut a check, right?
I'm actually probably the only person who really can answer these questions. Patty, would you like
Yes,
to
I would.
recognize me?
Absolutely. Since you're sitting behind me, I can't say you had your hand
Okay.
up. Please,
But my question was always, because I was under the assumption we had no contract when we were talking in April.
It's actually a one-page agreement. It's not a full-on, it's a vendor.
Uh-huh.
It's a vendor contract, like if you hired someone to come in and fix your air conditioning. It's not a lengthy contract, like a partnership contract. It's basically, Allison signed it in February. But for some reason, whatever reason, she did not make it really clear in her comments at the April board meeting that it had been signed. And I was equally in the dark, so when Allison left and Patty and I were going around and talking to potential executive committee search consultants and yeah, one of my primary questions for them was saying that we want to do it digital transformation for CMS, and I mentioned 2 or 3 different vendors that we've been talking to. I had no idea the Blackboard contract had been signed. I said, what do you think of these 2 or 3 vendors the staff is looking at? And by the way, they all did give Blackboard very high marks. They said it's very well regarded. It's widely used, particularly in nonprofits, particularly foundations use it a lot. So it's, I mean, it may not be familiar to this group, but it is a well-established platform for foundations for nonprofits.
It's going to do what we need it to do. That's where we need it. And we've had some feedback from Larry and Carol.
What I'm saying is just okay.
Yeah.
So at that time, I didn't know it. Then I found out that an agreement had been signed in February, and it is, again, a 1-page agreement that simply states that we were supposed to start in June. That is the first thing that almost anyone would have advised the previous executive director against, because that's right in the period where we're leading up to EIJ conference. All of the executive firms that I spoke with advised not implementing anything, even if we had a full-time executive director before EIJ, because you don't do an implementation right before a major project. They also advised bringing in the new executive director into this process. What this board, or what the previous board approved in the April board meeting was a budget line item to do an implementation of a new CMS. Typically, the board does not select the CMS. The process that everyone recommended and that I would recommend would be working with actually a tech consultant on this. And that's what our consultants Talbot have recommended, that we hire a tech consultant, preferably to work with a new executive director on implementation. So yes, we did make some, I think it was a very small initial payment in June, but we have not paid for the full implementation because I wanted to hold off on that until we got, I mean, Larry's been leading the project and he's brought in a lot of staff input. He did not get enough for billing, and that is one thing I told Larry that he should have brought in Billy sooner. He did get input from some others from Caroline, and they're feeling pretty positive about Blackboard. But long story short, I wanted to delay the implementation and not do it as the contract was for June. But preferably until we get either a full-time executive director and or both a tech consultant to help us with the implementation.
This is probably an appropriate time to also note that our Talbot friends believe they have the capacity to work with Blackboard. That if we were to continue with them for services and with a price tag that I won't disclose during the session, that is an option.
And I should point, I mean, this is not the reason we chose Talbot, but I mean, because we interviewed a few different firms for different things, but one thing is the woman who wrote the report in our office does have some experience implementing new content management systems.
Not Blackboard
not Blackboard in particular. She hasn't worked with them, but
HR systems.
Yeah, but HR systems in general. There's a project management aspect to it that she has familiarity with.
Lori.
We don't need a tech consultant. We have Billy. Number one. Yes, and in our current budget environment, to spend money outside when we have a very capable resource inside makes absolutely no sense to me. And I think I want to defer to you right now to make your motion so I can second it.
Right. And put this in Slack, but I'll read it aloud for the record, and I will email it to you with any edits, Jennifer. The motion is for the Blackboard contract to be forwarded to the SPJ board by end of business day, Thursday, September 12th, for review and possibly review of an out clause. And for Billy O'Keefe to have hands-on work with Blackboard by Monday, September 16th at the latest, as well as the ability to ask questions of the Blackboard staff. The board asked for a recommendation from Billy, Larry, and Caroline by October 1st. That gives you 2 weeks. If you need more, we can adjust that date. End of business day, October 1st. And then we pull the executive director, and we're not going to sign anything before he drops in or goes another route. But at least we have a well-informed team and a well-informed board on what exactly is going on. So that's the motion.
That's your motion. Okay, a little more discussion. I do think we need to know some of the cost according to pulling, flipping the start button. And so it's difficult. I endorse what you're saying in terms of investigating more and getting more data in front of us quickly. But I think we have an unknown factor, and that's the dollar amount.
Right. Which is negotiable.
Okay.
It's always.
All right. And finally, Billy, do you feel confident that this is
If
a
I can get in there and
passage?
use it, it'll be fine. Just to give a history, because I've done this several times, right? And so in 2014, Tara Puckey and I embarked on kind of something similar to this. And the vendor we talked to, we asked them, the report I sent to you back in June, like that detailed report with the 4 big needs we have, the very specific needs we have, can we do these things? And when I asked Blackbaud, they said yes, 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 yes. But 5 years ago, when I asked that other vendor, they also said yes, 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 yes. And then Tara and I sat down with it. It wasn't our own installation, it was just a demo installation that they provided us.
Gotcha.
We sat down, we went into the back end, we used it, and it turned out that the answers were actually no, maybe one yes, and then another no, and then another no. They couldn't do specifically what our chapters want us to do as far as providing reports that they can pull on demand. It didn't integrate with an awards platform. Like, there were things it just couldn't do that they said it could do because they don't understand what our members need the way Tara and I did. So that's why I need to get in there and do it hands-on before I can just endorse it. So 2 weeks is fine. I'll bury myself in it. But I just want a door to go in and use it.
And is there a question, is it your question that we can't give you that without paying them more? Is that the question?
That is my question.
That's what I think the
Whether
question
to get access, is there another check that has to be cut?
No.
The answer is no?
They should be able to provide a demo. I mean, all of these vendors usually.
I thought you already had a demo.
It's now post EIJ. This was the timeline that was envisioned, right? That after EIJ wouldn't be smart to do it right before EIJ. So, any other?
I thought you already had a demo. No.
No, I had a video tutorial where I talked to them. I mean, I talked and I asked these questions, and I got specific answers, which I reported.
You
I
have not
I had not touched it myself.
And the final answer might be, there's the ones to go with, and he's satisfied with it. Sure. That can very well be the answer.
So just to be clear, so if we pass this motion, we're not obligating ourselves to pay Blackbaud so you can see this. I just want to be absolutely sure, because I'm not down with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they're a good vendor, then they'll give it to us.
Okay. Alex,
We
anything
want
else?
to continue with this.
No, I'm just concurring. No, I can concur. There's no additional.
All right, very good. Question, Randy?
Yeah, Randy Shostak, DC Pro Chapter. First, really thank you so much for focusing on this issue. Speaking for the DC Pro Chapter and probably for a lot of other chapters, I know that this is really important and really urgent, and I really appreciate your focus. Just one question about the resolution. It sounds great as far as it goes. I wonder if there should be an addition, sort of a next step after Billy gets access and plays around with it. What happens next? Should there be some reports, or should there be some decisions, some determination?
As stated, the board asked for a recommendation, a report from Billy, Larry, and Caroline, the 3 key people working on it. And we get until October 1st into business, but that's adjustable if they need more time.
And would that include whether to continue with Blackbaud or whether to do a self-build?
Ideally, yeah. If I'm able to really get in there and use it, then I should be able to give an
All
answer.
right, let's move this forward. We've been talking about it a long time. Colin?
Yeah, so I've heard from my membership role, I've heard from a ton of members and chapters that have issues with the database. So I'm wondering if there's, I know I'm jumping the cart is before the horse or whatever right now, but can you establish like a working group perhaps to when you redesign, if you're getting to the point where you might be able to redesign the registration form, or how you feed the new database with new member registration and things like that, because we do have ideas.
We can do that, but that is a second priority after just making sure, we need to just make sure it functions the way you all want it to function.
Just don't forget us.
Right, as the membership group starts digging in and the other committees are activated and we start to see, oh, this would have been better than, all that will be collected, but first steps. And anything else critical? Okay, I think we're all on board. All those in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? All right, that is passed. passed. Thank you very much. I think that brings us to the next point that Mike had raised and asked to add to the agenda, and that has to do with the powers of the president of the board.
Sorry, I'm coming after you, because no, I'm kidding.
That's all right.
I think this is a longer term discussion, but yeah, swing that cap. It's a longer term discussion. I mean, it could be if our parliamentarian, if Bob was still here, I've been talking about it with him briefly last night. It's just moving forward and discussing the limits of being able to, for the president to be able to self-appoint to a staff position or an executive director type position. Is that a good way to go? Because now we're caught in a quandary. Alex, her presidency's done, and we're floating in the air without an ED for, I don't know, a month, 2 months, 3 months, we don't know. It's put us in a tough situation. I'll throw this out to the group is the discussion, okay, we need to have a very hard limit there, and it needs board approval moving forward if the president wants to do that. Does it need to be a hard no that the president just cannot do that? We go to another route, i.e. finding a firm to find an outside person to come in and do it, at least on a temporary basis. But we've got to work through this so we don't wind up in that situation again or something similar to it.
Right, and this of course does play into what's going to happen in the next 3 months, and who's going to make day-to-day decisions. And I think I've made pretty clear that I'm not in, I don't have the ability or the desire, and don't think it's the appropriate role for the president. And so we'll discuss that in executive session, what the price tag is to have outside services and the wisdom or not of going that route. So what you're proposing, are you proposing something in particular? Would this
I'm
be
not, I just want to hear from the board on an idea of moving forward. It could be a policy, it could be a bylaw, and this is something down the road that we're going to decide on. We've got to get it out there now.
Sure.
It's the elephant in the room.
And did we have any policy to guide us as we went into?
Patty?
Yes, yeah, go ahead, Alex.
And I may need to actually bring in Mark Balin on this. It's not a policy, it's actually a bylaw. The first person I spoke to when this happened was Mark Balin, and he advised me that the bylaws do say, and very specifically, that the president is the chief executive of the society. Now, in normal times, of course, the day-to-day duties of that are delegated to the executive director, but that chief executive power ultimately flows up to the president, and the executive director reports into the president for that reason. And he advised me that in these situations, often the president of the board took over the day-to-day responsibility for some time. He even asked me if I could relocate to Indianapolis for a month or two to get through the transition, and I said no, and that's an awful lot to ask for an unpaid elected position, which is why I was flying in and filling in. In terms of self-appointment, I would point out that the very first thing I did within 2 weeks was call a meeting of the executive committee and the top 2 officers of the foundation, because the executive director reports into both bodies. And Patty and I in that period had done a lot of research into the executive consultants who do these services, and Patty had come up with a figure of as high as like $5,000 or $6,000 a week. I went in actually hoping that we would hire someone to do this, because I didn't really plan on or intend on doing that much time in Indianapolis, but that committee came up with a decision that we could not afford those higher priced services, and asked if I would fill in. I then brought a plan, an actual plan to the board in our full board meeting, and the full board voted unanimously to approve the plan, which is that I would fill in for a few months, and the cost of not having to pay even our usual full-time executive salary, much less an interim, which is about double, was what allowed us to hire the outside help. So there was no self-employment. It was actually approved unanimously by the board. That being said, I obviously don't think it's ideal to have someone serving in both the president and the executive director role. For one thing, I was working 60-hour days. I don't really think anyone should do that. I mean, that was before EIJ. It would not be that much time now. But Patty, I would tell you, you're not off the hook, and that all the firms I spoke with said there are certain things that an interim will not do. For example, they won't sign contracts. So like when we had to renegotiate the 2021 location of the venue, when we had things come up with partners, In the absence of an executive director, the president has to do it. I mean, it's, in any case, the president or the executive director could do it, but in the absence of a full-time executive director, the intern won't be filling those functions. For example, you're going to have to do it until there's a full-time.
Right.
You can delegate to it. Non-staffers won't do it. Now, Mark, did you want to add anything to that? Since you were the one who gave
the only thing that I would say is there's an unusual circumstance here, because usually, typically, for organizations this size, you would have someone who would be a number two who could step in and be an acting. And so one of the things we discussed when this issue came up was, is there someone in Indianapolis who can step up to be the number two in the organization? And it was decided that Alex would be better positioned to take on essentially the acting executive director role through her powers that are given to her in the bylaws as the president. So that's the only other issue.
So it seems to me that we have some clarity on the question line, so.
One more thing I would add is, obviously this came up in Rebecca's term, and we had Tara. And Tara did a fine job as the interim. And I think everyone in this room knows we'd had incredible turnover, and most of the staff had been there less than a year. And there were competing interests. And for various reasons, we spoke along ourselves, the leadership at Marks, and determined that
I see your
there
hands,
was an appropriate staff member.
So I think what we're talking about here, since there is existing bylaw language that guided the decisions that were made, are you suggesting that you would like to make a bylaws change? And if so, let's be precise on what you're calling for here.
Right. What I'd like to see is a working group formed to review and revise the bylaw possibly.
On that particular topic, okay, Lauren?
Needs study.
Okay, so some history and context for either members watching or people in the room. Like Alex just said, at least in my tenure, there were 2 times that we were down an executive director, and I think one time it's called the deputy, the other time it's called associate executive director. And we had a qualified staff member who was able to fill that role, and that's what's ideal. But I also agree with Mike that we should explore a bylaws proposal to bring to our delegates to address the situation. Should this happen again sometime down the road, and we do not have a number 2, hopefully with the structure that has worked in the past, so maybe gets brought back again, it's a non-issue, but I think it's a good idea to have that proposal.
A suggestion. Patty has said she is not going to be serving that role. I will pledge in front of everyone in this room that I do not want to do that role, and will not do that role if I am not hit by a bus or a beer truck in the next year. I think this whole convention was changing for our members about what we should be focusing on. This is such a granular issue that is clearly not going to happen for 2 years. My humble request is that we put the horse before the cart, and we discuss whether we want an assistant executive director. And that once we do, if that position gets filled, then this maybe becomes unnecessary, maybe not, but that discussion take place first, and then either way, then we discuss the bylaws change. I'm on the bylaws committee, Bob Becker is on the bylaws committee.
Because that has the bylaws committee to explore it, that might just be the way to handle it.
That's right.
That's what I'm saying.
That's a task oriented.
All right, let's get this wrapped
That's what
up.
I'm saying. And a
My
year
point
and a
is-
half ago, we never thought we'd be in that situation.
Yeah, my
But
point
we
is,
wound up in it.
it's a good
Who
issue.
knows what's gonna happen?
Totally good issue, but I think there are other more important issues that we can focus on, and this one can kind of stay in abeyance, for down the road.
Mike, do you want to state your motion, or what's your pleasure?
Motion is to have the bylaws committee review the existing bylaw on presidential powers for self-appointment and possibly revise for our discussion today. I could type something up for the minutes.
Point of clarification, there is no bylaw on self-appointment. And by the way, it wasn't self-appointment because the executive committee and the full board voted for it. But there is no bylaw on self-appointment. The bylaw that this is based on is the bylaw that says that the president is the chief executive and presides at the convention. And the president is ultimately responsible. Whatever you do, you want that executive director to report to the president. You do not want to create a situation where the executive director is above the president. As to my knowledge, that doesn't really exist in the nonprofit world, but Mark, do you
I
want
don't
to
think
speak to
we're calling
that?
for that. Yeah, I don't think we're calling for that. So, do we have a second? We need to move forward. Do we have a second on the motion? Lauren, Bartlett, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No, because I
any
haven't
opposed?
seen the writing.
Okay.
I'm gonna say no.
Okay. We have a no from Matt Hall and a no from Yvette Walker.
We also table it. I'll draft something, we'll do it at our next meeting.
Okay, Mike has withdrawn and tabled the motion. We have time, and really bringing on new executive director is the highest priority. If that person decides to bring on a number two, perhaps the language then becomes, shows a preference for the number two to be the go-to. So, thanks for all that. I think we are done with new business, and I now ask for a motion to move into executive session to handle a couple of final items.
So moved.
Yes, thank you.
Actually, there's a follow-up from Thursday's meeting about disbanding the Greater Charlotte chapter. We're waiting for that piece of information. We didn't want to do that. Andy provided the information.
Okay, so we need to make a motion
to go ahead and let it disband.
Okay, that is the motion. Do we have a second on that motion? Tess is seconding. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, that's passed. Thank you. And now we will entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So we,
Thank you. A second? Second? Somebody second.
Second.
Thank you to Yvette. Thank you. We've got to hear some voices here. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you for everyone who came to sit in and offer your input and to run for office. And hope to see all your faces again